And I'll tell you what, we're going to start off with the city manager's briefings, and then I will be reading the order to go into a special session later. Okay. Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, the first budget presentation will be provided by our Chief Judge, Les Liddy, for the Circuit Courts.
Hey, good afternoon. Hello. How are you?
Nice to see all of you.
It's wonderful to have you back.
It's wonderful to be here. I was coming up. This is Dawson Entwistle. He's our new court administrator, just come on board this year. And as I told him as I came in the building, I've spent a substantial part of my life in this building,
Yes.
so it's good to be here. It's like home.
The prodigal son returns. What can I tell you?
So our budget is pretty unremarkable. If you have questions, we're happy to address them, but our budget is pretty unremarkable. I think it's just moving forward.
Okay.
If there are any questions in our budget, we're happy to receive them. I would say this, Mr. Mayor, we are very appreciative of the manager and his staff. They have been most attentive to and interested in the issues with the courts, and we very much appreciate it, Patrick. We really, really appreciate it. And I would say this also I thought as a point of interest, this building now was opened in 1991, and some of you on this dais voted on that building and were there when it opened. And of course, I was sitting where Becky's sitting today when it opened, and it's been 30 years. And the building has served us well. But we're looking at another 30 years in that building because it is a building built for more than 30 years. And so in the future, as we go forward, there are some things that need to happen to update any building that becomes 30 years old. And the manager, as I indicated, has been very attentive to that, and we're so pleased. And we appreciate everything the manager and the council have done for us.
No, I appreciate those comments, Les, and we had the privilege of having the juvenile domestic court judge here, express concerns also. And I truly appreciate the comments about the city management and receptiveness. And yes, we want to be the city of yes. And, we realize what it takes to sustain, government going forward, does come at a cost, but there is a benefit to it too. So, has anybody, Rosemary?
This may not be a question for you, but I'll get it out there anyway. I really thought that the escalators was in our budget last year, and obviously they're still in our budget this year. And since you brought up the building, if they were in the budget last year, why didn't they get fixed?
Yeah, so it wasn't fully funded in the budget. It's a $10 million project. So like most CIP projects, we usually phase it in multiple years. So I think the last budget we had 6 in. We had 4 in. Go ahead, Kevin. All right. We had 4 in and then $6 million that we added to this budget to complete it. If council approves it, then it'll be the $10 million needed to do the escalator replacement. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Tom Nicholas and building. Sorry.
That's okay, please.
Come on up, Kevin.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the judge.
Yeah,
That's okay.
I
You're on the
know.
right side of the
I was
ball
asking
here.
permission to approach.
Yeah, but if you give the wrong answer.
Yeah, I know where I'll truly get gavelled down, correct. So, Vice Mayor, to answer your question, it was originally anticipated to be closer to like a $4.5 million project based on some things that they saw whenever they got in there. The project's going to cost closer to $10 million. So the extra $6 million was programmed in year 1 of the CIP to get that to construction.
So
Tom Nicholas later on, as part of the building presentation, will be able to speak.
it was one of those, like an old house. Once they got in there, they found out it was a bigger project than they thought.
My understanding, whenever I last understood, they're actually, to get to it, to access it, are likely going to have to remove the front of the building to actually get access to it. So it's going to be quite a feat. Correct.
Remove the front of the building.
Portions of it, or yes, but like I said, Tom will likely be able to speak better to that.
Holy cow.
So
Well, anyway, I know it needs to be done, but, and I kept wondering, I knew we put it in the budget last year, and what happened? So
Escalators are
since you brought up the building, Les, I couldn't help but
the public
Yeah.
use
find
of
out,
escalators.
inquiring minds wanted to know.
Yeah, I think there was a movie a number of years ago, The Money Pit, that they bought the house, and it was like Dance of the Broomsticks. It was like, every time you pulled the layer back, it was
Well, this building
something
now
else.
is 30 years old, and there's things, we've been talking to the manager, and in your CIP last year, you put in a project to study judicial parking, because there is no security whatsoever for judges' parking, and times have changed since 1991, and as we all know, drastically. And there is a CIP project for that, and the architects are working on that. We'll be talking to you about that. And there are things with this building, because of the age and the change of times, that we're going to need to talk to you about so that we can ensure this building will last another 30 years, instead of saying, hey, this no longer will work for us. We think it can work for us. We just, like any building, you need to pay attention to it, and our manager is paying attention, and we appreciate it.
We have a great manager.
We do.
I think it's a beautiful building on the exterior, too.
It's very good. I
Well, it's a
appreciate that.
long-term investment. Anybody else at this point?
Well, you get more with less.
That's right. That's what we used to always say.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Don't you just love the newfound jocularity on this body? I tell you, really a good thing. We may be out of here by 2 o'clock. Who knows? But I'm only kidding. All right, moving on.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, we're going to enter to the portion of the presentation specifically for the stormwater and flood protection CIP. We're going to start specifically with the flood control first with our Stormwater Engineering Center Administrator, Tony Utterback.
Hello, how are you?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Wilson, members of council, Mr. Haney. I'm very happy to be here today to present to you the proposed FY23 flood protection program. I'm going to begin by giving you an overview of the program, followed by the creation of the master projects within the program. I'm going to touch on the standalone projects, accomplishments, and some challenges we are facing. So this is how the flood protection program is funded. As you can see, the bond referendum comprises most of that funding at over 76%, followed by appropriations to date of local funding at 21.5%. The other small pots of money include flood protection pay-as-you-go at $5.5 million, the federal funding at $8.1 million, that's FEMA reimbursement funds we received several years ago. And then the state funding of $4.1 million includes grant funding from the state's Community Flood Preparedness Fund. So the program has a total of $757.1 million for 41 projects. So the flood protection program is a new standalone CIP this year. If you recall, in the past, the flood control section was included in the stormwater CIP with operations and maintenance and stormwater regulatory. So we are now a standalone CIP. As I said, there are 41 total projects. We have created 7 master projects that contain 30 projects within those master projects. The idea behind the master projects is they have companion projects that are associated with each one of those master projects. And all of the appropriations to date within the companion projects can be transferred with city manager approval between projects in order for us to advance these projects more quickly. All transfers will be reported to the Flood Control Community Oversight Board monthly. We also have 11 standalone projects and programs that are programmed at over $102 million included in the flood protection program. So now I want to talk a little bit more detail about the master projects. The first one is the Central Resort District. It includes these 3 projects. You can see the appropriations to date on each of those projects. These are the 3 projects that will be constructed together. The bounding area for the Central Resort District includes Laskin Road to the north, Atlantic Avenue to the east, 17th Street to the south, and Birdneck Road to the west. These projects are still in the planning stages, and as I said, they will be constructed together. The next master project is Eastern Shore Drive Phase 1. It includes these 8 companion projects. Total appropriations to date for this master project is $34 million. These are all of the projects within the master project. We will be constructing 4 new pump stations, side street drainage improvements along the north side of Shore Drive, and side street drainage improvements along the Cape Henry Drive. We'll also be elevating Lynnhaven Drive at the intersection of West Great Neck Road and Lynnhaven Drive. We did submit an application for the BRIC grant, which is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant. That grant would design and construct the Lynnhaven Colony Park Pump Station, the Cape Henry Canal Phase 2, the Lynnhaven Drive Pump Station, and elevate Lynnhaven Drive. If we are successful in obtaining that funding, all 4 of those projects would be constructed together. However, if we're not, the plan is to design and construct Lynnhaven Colony Park Pump Station, Lynnhaven Drive Pump Station, and Cape Henry Canal project together. The rest of the projects in this master project will be designed and constructed separately. The Green Infrastructure Master Project includes these 2 sub-projects, and the appropriations to date for this master project is $40 million. The first sub-project, the Marsh Restoration in Back Bay. This is where we are constructing marsh terraces within Bonnie Cove. The rendering you see on the presentation, the one on the left, is what the area looks like today, and the rendering to the right would be what it would look like after the marsh terraces are constructed. We did submit an application for the state's Community Flood Preparedness Fund to help us fund the construction. We submitted the grant application for $5 million. The Elizabeth River Wetland and Floodplain Restoration Project. This project received a grant from the state for $3 million from the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. We are just starting the design of this project, and it includes wetland restoration and living shorelines in the 2 areas you see here. Lake Bradford Chubb Lake Master Project includes these 3 projects with appropriations to date at $119.5 million. The first project, Lake Bradford Chubb Lake, was the original parent project of this program. It includes these 2 sub-projects. The first, the Lake Pleasure House Outfall, will begin construction this summer. It is estimated to be complete by spring of next year. The Lake Bradford Dredging Project will be advertised in a couple months. The construction start date expected in the late summer and completed by the end of 2023. The Chubb Lake, Lake Bradford Pump Station and Outfall has not started. We are in the process of doing the pump station location study for this project. The plan at this point is to have this project be a design, build, delivery. And the Church Point Thurgood BMP and Conveyance Improvements Project will be a standalone design, bid, build project. The Linkhorn Bay Drainage Basin Master Project includes these 2 projects. Appropriations to date are $6.7 million. The first project, the first Colonial Road and Oceana Boulevard Drainage Improvements Project, we submitted a Community Flood Preparedness Fund application from the state for $1.8 million for this project. We just submitted it last week for the round 3 funding. The design for this project has not started. The SeaTac Neighborhood Drainage Improvements Project, we were awarded a Community Flood Preparedness grant from the state for $1.9 million, and we are just scoping the design for this project. The Princess Anne Plaza Lakes and Windsor Woods Master Project includes these 10 projects with over $266 million appropriated to date. The first project that will be constructed within Princess Anne Plaza is the Bow Creek Stormwater Park. Right now, we are currently at approximately 60% design on Phase 1. The next project, the North Lynnhaven Creek Tidegate Pump Station and Barriers Project, and the 3 projects in the lakes, the Holland Road Gate, the flood barriers, South London Bridge Creek Channels and Gate. All 3 of those projects will be included as part of one design-build contract. In addition, in Windsor Woods, the pump station project, the flood barriers project, and the Thalia Creek Lake Trash More Improvements project will also be included in that one design-build contract. Also in Windsor Woods, we have these 3 neighborhood pipe projects. The first one, Clubhouse Road, is currently under construction. It is expected to be complete this August. The South Plaza Trail Presidential Boulevard Drainage Improvements Project will begin construction in June, and we estimate construction to be complete by summer of 2024. And the Old Forge, Red Lion, Old Forge Court project will begin construction early next year and be complete by late 2024. The Southern Rivers Master Project includes these 3 projects with a total of $88.5 million appropriated to date. All 3 of these projects are currently in the planning stages. For Punka Ferry Road, we will be raising Punka Ferry west of the bridge all the way to Blackwater Road. That project, the delivery method is still to be determined. The Sandbridge Newbridge Intersection Improvement Project, also still in the planning stages. This project will raise the intersection and add a large box culvert under Newbridge Road. And then the Westnet Creek Bridge project. This is a very large project. We are also still in the planning stages for this project, and the design and construction method is still being determined. So the standalone projects in the flood protection program include these 11 projects and programs. You can see the appropriations to date for each of those. I'm not going to go into detail on these. These have been in our program for a while now. Moving on to the accomplishments. We completed construction on 3 projects in the last year. The 50th Street Drainage Improvements Project, the Cape Henry Canal Phase 1 project, the Aragona Drainage Improvements Project, and we have completed the master plan for the Upper Westnet Creek Drainage Basin. So I'll close today with some challenges. Now, the first 2 you see here, you will probably hear the rest of this afternoon. Obviously, escalating costs and inflation are a concern moving our program forward, as well as supply chain disruption and material sourcing issues. We've already experienced a delay on one of our projects in construction because of materials. And the last one, the previous absence of state and federal assistance. I'm happy to say we were chosen to be in the Army Corps of Engineers work plan for the Coastal Storm Risk Management Study. So that will put us in the queue to have federal funding on our projects once those projects have been identified after their study is complete. And then with the state funding, we have been successful in getting Community Flood Preparedness Fund grant funding for several of our projects, but the future of that funding is still unknown, so we don't know of any future state funding sources for our projects. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Tony, I noticed one thing. It seems that the projects are pretty well distributed throughout the city.
Yes, I would agree. The 7 master projects are distributed in equal areas without the city, yes.
Yeah, and, I think that's important to realize, going forward that, we're not, zeroing on one area, I think when we had the bond referendum, we wanted explicit this was going to be a tangible benefit to the entire city. So, I just want to applaud you, Mr. Bellucci.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Tony. How
Hi.
are you? It's nice to see you.
Good.
Thank you for your presentation. I just have a question in terms of the CIPs as it's recommended in formulation. How much of the element of risk to neighborhoods and to communities did you formulate in your recommendations? And in other words, if there's a higher likelihood that a neighborhood could flood or will flood, did that priority enter into your frame of thinking when you made these recommendations for how these projects should be funded? In other words, sequentially.
Yes, so actually, the original projects from the bond referendum were projects that were already underway that still needed funding. So, for example, Windsor Woods, Prince Anne Plaza, and the Lakes, the area that experienced some of the worst flooding after Matthew, were high priority projects. In fact, they were one of the 6 projects that were originally proposed in the CIP back in FY 2017 when the first infusion of funding came into the CIP. So the projects that were already underway obviously had the priority just because we were already moving ahead with those. So those priorities were based on neighborhoods that had flooded previously.
I thank you for that, and I think it's incredibly important that we maintain that priority because flooding is a real risk for all parts of our city, and I do think it's important, as the mayor pointed out, that the flood control projects are distributed geographically, and yet the neighborhoods that I have the privilege to represent, they can't afford to wait any longer, and so I'm grateful for that prioritization that you've implemented, and I'm really interested in ensuring that that schedule is preserved in the budget that we approved this May. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara?
Y'all probably have this really nice list of projects that have been completed over the last, well, I think with Matthew, we've had a certain list of projects that came out of Matthew because those were the projects that were brought to our attention from that particular storm.
Right.
However, if it had come at a different angle or something, we probably would have had other neighborhoods that would have been on that list. But anyway, we've had this basic list throughout that time. But I know that some of them have been completed, and then I think we had some before that. But could you kind of give us a list of what has been completed? Because I think there's a perception that we really haven't been doing anything. Of course, a lot of it with these projects, it takes a long time to do the design and all of that work that has to be done before you can actually go to construction.
We actually have a pretty exhaustive list that we provided, I believe, last year in the Friday package, and we can certainly provide that to you again. I mean, it was pages of what we have done because, as you mentioned, a lot of the studies had to be done, and we did a lot of those as part of the sea level rise adaptation strategy just to push us forward with some other projects. And then the master planning has also identified some additional projects. But we've been working since 2017, once we got that first infusion of funding, continuously getting to where we are now. And now that we have this funding to move forward to implement some of these projects, they're going to move a lot faster. I mean, just in the last year, we went to advertise for construction 4 projects between November and January. So you'll see more construction going on this year than you have previously.
And then to just address that part of the city, the southern part of the city, which is so difficult to address from storming. And of course, we're coming into that season when we're going to be seeing the southwest winds, and we're going to hope it doesn't do what it does sometimes, and that is flood us without any rain. And it's the difference in the topography and the whole hydrology of the city is just phenomenal between the north and the south.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's why you don't see very many projects in the southern watersheds, because it's a whole different thing. But I really appreciate that we do have something. Of course, 2 of them are road projects that are not going to stop the flooding, but it will at least keep the roads from flooding, and that's Punka Ferry and Newbridge and Sandbridge. But then the other 2 just have some promise of doing something. And I just am so appreciative that we have that Marsh restoration project, which of course this is a pilot, but because y'all were so good to continue the study for another year beyond the initial study to see if there was anything that we could do to try to help with what happens with the water coming up from the Albemarle. And so the fact that the staff was proactive and already had a opportunity to get some grant money to do some design for that project means that it should be under construction next year at this time. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That will be, and if it works, then we've got another couple of thousand acres of marsh that we could do the same thing to. But of course, the idea is to slow the water down. It's not going to help with the getting rid of it because that we can't do at this point. But if we slow it down, maybe the wind will shift and it will not do its dastardly deeds. But that whole area just is so different. But then the Westnet Creek, I think, and I really appreciate that being in the bond referendum, even though that was a sea level rise project. But I think that has some promise as well. And I realized with that being a big project and one that had not been anticipated, I think that was one that takes up the full 10 years.
It does, and we need to start, we're going to have to start with a preliminary engineering analysis because we're at just concept level at this point.
But that should have a big impact on the center part of the city that is around Westnet Creek, even all the way up to Ship's Corner Road. So, but the southern part, I wish we could do something as far as pump stations and so forth and say, well, now this community is much more protected. Where we are, we don't have that luxury, and it depends a lot on the wind. So we'll just hope we have a very mild spring and the wind doesn't blow very hard and we get past another spring without the flooding. But if it's going to do it, it's going to do it now. So watch out. But thank you a lot. Y'all have done a great job.
Thank you.
No. Anybody else? Okay, Rosemary and then Linwood.
So I understand y'all are working on signage to get out to where these projects are. So any idea when we might be seeing signs pop up?
Yes, ma'am. So we have created, I should say, the communications department has created a very nice ripple effect sign for our projects. You'll see the first sign go up at one of our projects that's currently under construction, the Clubhouse Road project. There is already a construction sign out there because they go out as soon as the project, when the contractor mobilizes, that's part of their contract is to put out the sign. We're going to install a second sign with that project, and then we have two more projects, the Eastern Shore Drive, Cape Henry Canal, where we're relocating the gravity sewer. There will be a sign, the ripple effect sign at that project, as well as the dredging project in Lake Bradford outfall project will also have a ripple effect sign, and you will see those up in the next couple months. Those two projects were advertised for construction. January was the Eastern Shore Drive project, and November was the outfall project. So NTP for those projects is in the next couple months, and as soon as those projects mobilize, you'll see those construction signs go up.
I think it's great that you're going to use the same logo for what the bond referendum was, so that will help remind people that their vote really did matter, and they'll be able to see the results of their tax dollars and what their voting did. So wherever we can having some of these projects, even though we're not totally ready to start shoveling dirt or whatever, I think it's good for people to know where they're going to be and that they're coming.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
Coming soon to a neighborhood near you, type of thing. So I'm really excited about getting the signage out. Thank you.
And
Councilmember,
Linwood? Oh, yes.
sorry, Mayor, I wanted to respond to Vice Mayor. And just from a follow-up from our conversation previously, Vice Mayor, we are working to identify those operation projects where council did plus up an additional 45 or so $1 billion of American Rescue Plan Act money to put out some signage on that as well, because that is a part of our overall flood protection program. So we do want to let the public know as well that that's a part of the flood protection program as well. So those should be going out at a sooner pace than the capital improvement projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Tony, I just want to make sure I'm relaying this information correctly when I speak. So the 7 umbrella master projects, they are grouped together because they all drain to the same watershed. Is that how the master projects are grouped?
No, sir. So during the bond referendum, there were 6 areas identified. There's a 7th one because originally green infrastructure was included in the southern rivers area. We have since pulled that out since we have sub-projects. So it's still the 6 areas that were identified in the bond referendum, but it doesn't, they were all over the city. They don't just drain to one watershed. So we've got some in the Lynnhaven, we've got the living shorelines in the Elizabeth River. So they're not just one watershed. They're just companion projects that are related to that master project. So the Eastern Shore Drive projects, all of those are grouped together. All of the Windsor Woods, Prince and Pleasant Lakes projects together. So there was a theme that we had presented during the bond referendum, and we just continued and brought in those companion projects with them.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else at this point? Yeah.
We received a letter from one of the delegates, and apparently went to a civic league about water levels at Lake Bradford. I'm assuming that the low water level in Lake Bradford has something to do with the flooding project, drainage project, and so forth. Do you know?
We haven't started the project in Lake Bradford yet, so I'm not sure what letter you're referring to.
Yeah, so Councilmember Jones, I got the email from you and Mr. Moss yesterday. I have Deborah from my office who's reaching out to the delegate's office to get a copy of the letter so we can circulate it amongst staff and get a better sense of what's going on. As soon as we find out what he's asking for, staff will, as quickly as possible, respond to him. And we'll also share the information with council before we respond to the delegate's office as well, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Guy?
Can I just ask a question on this very point? Are you saying, Mr. Manager, that you only have become aware of this letter in the last day or two or so?
Yeah, I don't recall having a copy of that letter.
We've had it for a while. It brings up a point that's kind of occurred to me before. Mail to council. I hope we can find a way that it doesn't depend on one of us to forward mail, particularly from a member of the legislature, to council. I certainly would have done it if it just didn't occur to me that it wouldn't come to your attention and get handled in the normal course. I just put that out there as something I think council needs to address about if we're whose responsibility is it when there is mail to all of council to make sure that the manager's office is as aware of it as we are, and in the same way. I'm not in any way commenting on this particular letter. It just brings up an issue that I've had in the past about mail to council not getting to your desk for response as well.
Okay, Barbara.
If I might just make another comment, I really appreciate the great job you folks do in identifying grants from these other sources that will help us, because we all know that we're probably not going to have enough, particularly with the inflation and so forth, to cover all of this. But these grants, that as they become available, and you all have always done a good job, but you're really doing a good job now in identifying those opportunities, and we really appreciate that. It's whoever in Public Works does such a good job. I know I look at Phil Pullen and know that he stays on top of the funding for everything, and all of you do, and that's so important, particularly as we hear these other levels of government talking about wanting to help with infrastructure and so forth. So I hope that can be a continuing source, particularly with that Marsh restoration. I think we've got a great opportunity with the Federal Wildlife Refuge in that area. And as well as North Carolina, we really have so many opportunities there to partner and to leverage. But that's going to be so important, and I really appreciate the job y'all do.
And we actually are going to be submitting another NIFWIF grant to help with the construction of the Marsh restoration, and that's coming up in the next couple months.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, anyone else? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, moving on.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, we'll do the next presentation as part of the flood protection stormwater CIP, which will be operations. For Tom, you going? You going now? We're doing operations now. Yes, sir.
We're ready to go to.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Milliken. I'll be presenting along with my colleague Mark Jones with the stormwater management brief. We can go to the next one.
Oh, you got the clicker right there.
I got a clicker.
All right.
Thank you.
Sir.
I wasn't sure who had it.
All right.
There we are. Thank you. I'll kick us off with a brief funding overview and then discuss the water quality regulatory section, and then I'll turn it over to Mark for the operations and maintenance section. Okay, so funding with the remainder of our stormwater management program is split approximately 70-30 between the maintenance and water quality regulatory sections, with a total 6-year program funding of $166 million, covering 35 projects and programs. So I'll dig further into the water quality regulatory section. There we are. We have 5 projects requested at target. All 5 have been presented in the past. 4 of these projects are enhancements to existing lakes, which add features such as forebays and wetlands for added water quality improvements. The 5th project at the bottom of the table is the Lynnhaven River Basin Ecosystem Restoration Project. That's a tongue twister. It gets me every single time. This is a commitment to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers through a cost participation agreement. The project had a lot of really good things happen this year I want to touch on at the end of this. The majority of our regulatory section is programmatic in nature. Most of these programs are driven by TMDL requirements, which are like a pollution diet for our lakes, streams, and rivers. These TMDLs are applied throughout the city, and we have developed 5 of our programs to focus on water quality improvements in different watersheds within the city. Watershed-based programs may fund smaller water quality improvement projects. Projects that are more than $1 million, we split out into the standalone. If we can cover it with less than that, we keep it in these watershed programs. Another programmatic CIP of note is the Surface Water Regulatory Compliance Program, which funds many of the essential programs required by the city's MS4 permit, addressed each year in our annual report to DEQ. It's always worth me bringing this one up because this program includes inspections and audits by DEQ and EPA every 5 years. If either agency finds non-compliance, they can issue a fine of up to $32,500 per day per occurrence. So doing the math, that adds up to $12 million per year per occurrence, assuming we only have one occurrence. So it's a very important program. Okay, I want to get back to that accomplishment with the tongue twister project that I'm not going to try it again. This project achieved outstanding progress this year. The project overall supports Chesapeake Bay and Lynnhaven River restoration efforts. This is an example of a successful partnership between the City of Virginia Beach and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and also great coordination within multiple city departments. The city participates in a cost share agreement with the Corps to contribute $14.5 million of the $40 million total cost. Phase 1 of the project completed construction in both the oyster reef habitat and the wetland restoration at Princess Anne High School. The oyster reef completed this year almost a year ahead of schedule at a significantly lower cost. Installed those little oyster balls, the concrete structures that oysters can grow on and help clean our river water. I was going to bring one in. I couldn't figure out all of the logistics to do it, but it's a very great show and tell. If anybody wants to see one, I think it's really cool, so I get excited about that. The wetland restoration has also been a great success, partnering with schools on the location. Students at City of Virginia Beach Public Schools helped to plant a section of the wetlands this year, and next already happened, the Corps of Engineers held a workshop with teachers on how they can take classes out there and teach both classes and also perform important monitoring duties for the long-term health of this wetland. So we're very proud of our Virginia Beach students for the great work they are doing and continue to do to improve the city's water quality. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Mr. Manager, can't forget the City Attorney's Office. We do a lot of work together. I'd like to talk about the operations side of the house and take a look at programs, projects with no change. And starting with those three, we have 42nd Street, Arctic Avenue. Those projects have wrapped up, and the only one we have left that's just wrapping up now is Pinewood Road, which is out on the Little Neck. We've got a couple weeks left wrapping up that project. I have a future slide showing some photos of that. That was a really cool project with multiple contractors. Had a few challenges, but it turned out really well. Looking at O&M projects with no change, FY23, totaling about just under 18 million, 17.89 to be exact. Looking at new projects, we have two. You're familiar with the ARPA for the federal funding for the American Recovery Plan for both the dredging, for the rehab and for the dredging. The first up to bat is the Enhanced Neighborhood Rehabilitation Program. So as you're aware, it was to add funding for $23.58 million for to adjust rehabilitation efforts. We've currently have 9 of 16 neighborhoods under design and scoping for construction. Under the total cost, as mentioned, $23.5 million. Our funding obligation deadline is December 31st, 2024, and then we have to finish construction by 2026, end of year 2026, and we are currently on track to do so. Next up is lake management. Same project, same type thing, to add $21.3 million to our dredging program. We're currently 14 lakes under design. That'll be done in a bid package type grouping of a few lakes each. Same thing. Funding obligation deadline will be 2024, construction 2026. And you've seen a couple of photos here. This is Glenwood 7, which is currently under construction, not using ARPA dollars, but since we don't have an ARPA lake under construction, I thought I'd show you a typical lake, what it'll look like, just like a normal lake under construction. This is one in Glenwood under the capital side, under 100-232 CIP. Moving on to accomplishments. The first one is Site 18 out in the southern watershed. This is a before and after looking from Pleasant Ridge Road. This was approximately just under 4,000 cubic yards of material removed. Total cost was just under $1.4 million. We completed this in January of this year. Next up was Site 15 on the other side of Beggar's Bridge between Pleasant Ridge and Charity Neck, which is on the other side of the Beggar's Bridge Reach. And it was approximately 3,200 cubic yards, was just under $2 million total construction and design cost, and was completed just last month. And next is Pinewood Road, which I mentioned earlier, which will be wrapping up, should be wrapping up by the end of this month. Total cost was just a hair over $2 million between two contractors. And you can see some construction photos there of the new double box culvert and the sheeting with construction in place. And we have another dredging project, Stratford 3, which was it wasn't a high-cost project, but it was an exceptionally challenging project with all the administration, hold harmless agreements, the real estate, city attorney's office. It was a big win for us, and a big shout out to them for helping us overcome a lot of significant challenges with that project. And so we wrapped that up and that whole lake system in February. And that was a big win for the residents out there because it tied in to several other capital projects. So we were pretty glad to wrap that up. And then lastly, a rehab project, Brigadoon Christopher, it's about 27,000 linear feet of pipe. It was a little over $1 million, and it's estimated to be complete in May. We're just wrapping up the construction. Photos here of a typical lining operation. This is what you'll see typically too for ARPA. You'll see this all over the city and spread out in all the different districts that you represent. Construction lining and for the pipes that we line and repair to extend the life of them for the next generations to come. And then lastly, can't have a successful program without challenges because it all doesn't go perfect. So as with the flood control program, overall construction cost increases, we're seeing it in the maintenance side of the house as well, and funding for current and future maintenance requirements. And we'll continue those efforts as best we can with the American Rescue Plan. And we're working as best we can with what we have on the maintenance cycle and backlogs to satisfy the residents. But we get new requests every day, and we're working on the ones that we have. Increase and keep pushing those neighborhood rehabilitation efforts because the residents do like to see that production in the neighborhood to return into that current rain event, rain to the drain type maintenance cycle, and then expand canal and roadside ditch maintenance the best we can as funding allows. And with that, I will turn it over to any questions you may have.
Rocky.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if you go back to slide 21, I just had a question about that that Stratford Chase.
Yes, sir.
That there it is. That dredge right there with that crane on it, is that sitting on planet Earth or is it sitting on water? What is it?
That is floating on a barge, and that is actually getting ready to float.
Okay.
That actually sitting on.
So I can't tell. Is it water underneath that, or is it just soil from the earth?
That is actually right at the entrance to the lake, getting ready to be launched.
Okay, and then that's the same shot.
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like now. If you go out there now, that's what Stratford looks like now. Yes,
so they
sir.
floated that in there.
Yes, sir.
At top of okay.
Yes, sir. And then they float it, and then they go through the canal, and then they do the center channel to dredge to plan, and then they put it in a dump bucket to drain, and then haul it out by truck out to the pit.
All right. Well, thank you. I didn't know if it was a wheeled vehicle that was driving in there, because on this picture it almost looks like it's soil that is driving on.
Now, we build a construction entrance that's, per plan, where we have easement access, and then we bring in our construction equipment, and then we put it on a barge, and then we float it out through the access way. Yes, sir. And that's where the encroachments and all that come into play, because a lot of these waterways are very narrow, and people build these elaborate, because they consider it waterfront property, and so they get kind of extravagant with their docks and sheds and bars and everything that they want to build on their little waterway.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anything else?
My favorite project.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to ask you about.
Hit me with it. Yes, ma'am.
Lead ditch, right. I just want to compliment the contractor that did this Site 18. They really did a good job, much better than the previous contractor who had done other projects for this overall.
Okay.
And I still would love to walk that, but before the cottonmouths get real active.
Yes, ma'am.
And the Site 15 was the other side. I never really saw it come out. So
Well, it's done. Yes, ma'am. It's complete.
all the way from Pleasant
The ridge down to Charity Neck.
Charity Neck.
Yes, ma'am. And the entrance is at Dolly. That's the entrance is at Dolly, I believe, right? Or is that side 18?
Well, where the dolly came in. But anyway,
Right.
I'm very familiar with that area. 'Cause
I know you are, yes, ma'am.
rode there many a time.
That's
in
your
the
old
day.
stomping ground since the 70s. I was there for your history lesson,
Oh, okay.
right?
But this project, now that you've done the Beggar's Bridge projects, I mean, this is the one that everybody depends on. So will y'all be moving now down to Nanny's Creek or some of the other watershed areas?
Yes,
And how
ma'am,
are
that's
you
the
going to do
plan.
that?
Actually, we've got Site 11 in purchasing, waiting to bid. That's already been designed. And we also are working on, we took that 99 report, that PB&J report. We took that and I'm not going to go into all the details, but we put some engineering with that and overlaid it with our current ORD program and a bunch of stuff. We mixed that all up to look at what we currently do and what they did back then, to look at an assessment. And the result is those farm ditches that cut into Nanny's Creek overlap a lot of the ORD work that we currently do, minus a couple. And so I have the consultant currently doing a survey on a condition assessment on the entire county and out of the Southern Watershed CIP. And out of that, Nanny's Creek is currently being surveyed into 2 phases. Between Mill Landing is the cutoff at the bridge. So we're going to come from the entrance to Nanny's down to, in phase 1, that survey will be complete in scope roughly next month. And so we'll do that first, 10,000 cubic yards or so, and then from Mill Landing out to Redhead Bay. So the thought process is that major arterial will be the first major dredging project to open up from the southern beggars down through Nanny's and out, then do a condition assessment over the whole basin in addition to the ORD work, and draw those farm ditches and all the other minor ditches in to Nanny's. Then look at Oakham and all the others, smaller lead, well, what you call lead ditches, but they're canal ditches, into the south and southwest, out to the east, that drain out into the bay. So that's the overall macroscopic big picture logic that we're currently working on. And so as far as the Southern Canal CIP, that $2.39 million a year is being dedicated and allocated, and it's all documented in the CIP budget. So if you want to read it, it's all in there. I documented the entire plan if you want to give it a read.
I'd like to see that.
You sure could. It's all in there.
Well, that
So-
3.9 million, of course, part of that is money for ARP. We supplemented from the ARP Agricultural Reserve Program, not the ARPA, but the ARP.
No. Yes, ma'am. If
We
you, if I
get $1
misspoke.
million from that ARP every year with what we were putting in here. So the whole southern part of the city really depends on these lead ditches. So I'm really glad y'all are doing this assessment. Nanny's Creek area is really big, but of course those farm ditches can't go anyplace if we don't have these done. But once you do it and do it well, the way we just did Site 18, it's good for a lot of years.
Yes, ma'am. All of them are going to be worked the same way with the same type process. And so that whole condition assessment, the thought process was that we do Nanny's first. That'll get me through FY 23, 24. My condition assessment will be done. Then I can take a look at the end of FY 23, beginning of 24, and I can look at that condition assessment. And then I can take a look in FY 24 dollars, take a look at the CIP and figure out where the additional needs are.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because I know what we did earlier, in 99, so basically was snag and drag, but they really didn't get the dredging done. So this is so important, and I really appreciate
Yes,
y'all
ma'am.
for-
And the ORD work will continue
That's-
in one zone cycle to the north and one to the south. So you're still going to have production there, and we're going to do the major arterial. So you're still going to have production there. Site 11 work is still going to continue, and we're going to continue to do the condition assessment. So all that work, so you're still going to have all the Southern Canal work is going to be expended out of that CIP, plus the ORD work, in addition to the condition assessment.
Right, good.
So that was the thought process, and anyway.
That sounds
I
good.
hope that
Sounds
answers
like
your
we're on the
question.
right track. We'll keep working on it. Sounds good.
Yes, ma'am.
But on the first part, the whole thing with the water quality, just to make a comment on that part, we think all the time about quantity, getting the water off, and we forget that we have to also make sure that the quality is maintained, and y'all do a great job with that. Of course, we've got all these permits that we have to do and so forth to keep us on the right track. But that's so important because we lose sight of the quality aspect when we're so concerned about the quantity. But it's
And they
really
very
important.
much partner with each other.
Thank you
They're
very much,
intertwined.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
And then on this, the whole thing with operations and maintenance, this was such an important part of that referendum resolution that we promised the people, that we were going to get the maintenance done. And this couldn't be emphasized enough, because that's what people are wanting to know. When are you gonna fix my ditch? And I think getting these cycles right is going to be important, so that we know, you know, we've been hearing in past years, oh, it takes 25 years to do this, or 99 years to do the lakes, or whatever it is. We've really got to get those cycles right, and we need to know what we're telling the people, and that it's going to be right. So we have a ways to go yet, but that part of the referendum can't be forgotten, because we get bogged down on the 21 projects. We've got to remember the operations and maintenance. This is critical.
And
really
the direct,
appreciate
yes,
your
ma'am,
work.
and the director did tell me on Friday that he has a more detailed presentation planned for just ARPA in the spring.
Good, okay, thank
So
you.
you get more details then.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Boy, are we having fun today. This is good stuff.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Yeah, doing great. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, thank you for your time. City Council, City Attorney's Office. Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, Tom Nicholas is going to come and present on our buildings and our other building-related assets.
Now's the time, Tom.
Yes, sir.
You had a tour last week.
Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Wilson, members of council, Mr. Dehaney, apologies for coming up a little early last
no
time.
problem.
I was just excited to be here. This is going to be a great year for buildings and assets. It really is. You know, we're opening the new city hall, moving in right now, and that's a big event. But we're also opening House Creek Marsh Pavilion, Veterinary Care Center, and the Burton Station Fire EMS Station this year. And so it's fun to see projects come to completion. We're also making solid progress on the Building 2, now Building 3, Building 11 renovation, and looking forward to putting Virginia Beach Police Department, Police Admin, and First Precinct into their new home. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. So this slide pretty much speaks for itself. I've got 33 projects in the Buildings and Assets CIP. And I'll talk, but the 4 of them are American Rescue Plan Act funded and 1 Shuttered Venues Grant, which really was great for us this year in so many ways. Programmatically, this year's Buildings and Assets CIP shows very little change from the previous year. 26 of the 33 projects and programs have no change. We're not asking for any more money. It's just keeping things moving along as they are. It's not a year for major new initiatives in the CIP. When we get to the end, if you have questions on any of these, I'll take them, but I wasn't going to walk through all 26 of the no change projects. There are some projects with modifications, and I will be talking in detail about those. And I've got a separate slide on each one of them, but there's 5 where we're asking for additional funds or realigned funds. There are also 2 new projects that I'll be talking about. And so let's jump right into ones with major changes. So various buildings rehab and renewal 4. That's the CIP that I use every year to maintain the city's 382 city-owned buildings and more than 800 structures by contract. I mean, I have my maintenance force of various trades that are in the buildings, but this is the dollars that I use to get contract design done, contract maintenance work done, and buy certain types of materials. We're requesting that this be plussed up from $3.2 million a year to $3.8 million a year. That extra $600,000 gives us $300,000 to address a backlog of maintenance and repair items that are coming up, starting to show in our public libraries. We also had an audit done of Americans with Disabilities Act deficiencies in the city, actually several years ago done. I think it was done in the summer of 2019. They really looked at 12 facilities. They identified a few things that were wrong. We are correcting those, but part of the agreement with the Department of Justice is that we go back and look at all of the city's buildings. So to go look at 382 buildings and do a comprehensive survey on any Americans with Disabilities Act potential deficiencies and correct those is going to require some money. Not sure that it's going to be $300,000 a year for a long time, but that was put in the budget so that I'll have the ability to move forward on that when that agreement is signed. One near and dear to your heart, and I'm sure we'll talk during questions about this as well, the escalator replacement. Truth be told, no, we asked for $4 million for this project, thinking full well that was enough money to design and replace the escalator. At that time, because these escalators are huge, there's 8 of them, you can't take them in and out through the door. It's simply not possible. To cost effectively do it, you would take them out whole and bring in a new one whole and set that down. The only way to do that is to take the curtain wall off the interior court. So if you come up to what used to be the front of the building, you can actually take the glass and the frame off the stairwell entrance and take the escalators out and put the new ones in. Or you can take the roof off the building and lift them up with a crane. We got into design and looked at that, and that caused major inconvenience for the courts building for a long period of time. And so we walked away from that and said, can we do this without doing that? And the way you do that is you rebuild escalators in place. So you take the escalator and you take it apart and you bring in all the parts and you just build a new escalator where the old one was. So we decided to go in that direction. That led us to take a really look at the heavy-duty requirements for escalators, the staging, utility relocations, renovating that room, and realized we didn't have enough money. We also got hit with material price increases, huge material price increases, 250 to 300% on some of the items that are going into this building. So now the whole project is really $10.6 million, and I'm asking for your support in funding the additional $6.5 million to get this done. The design is done. When we have the funding, we would start this work as early as this fall, and that would be done in about 15 months, so it would finish up in the spring of '24. And I'll talk more about Building 10, 10A, and 10B if you've got questions at the end. Beach maintenance facility, again, the city's absolutely worst condition facility. You have already put this in the program at $20 million previously. When it was funded last year, again, with design in FY24 and construction in FY25, there was a balance to complete of $700,000 that was not programmatically available. Again, working with management services, they found those funds for FY25 for the construction, put it in, and this replaces our 45-year-old facilities at 14th, 15th, and Park. Really critical facilities for the condition of our oceanfront. This is where beach ops, traffic ops, street sweeping, building maintenance for the oceanfront, Parks and Rec landscaping, and the planning parking management group all do their nesting for the work that they do down at the oceanfront. And we are exploring a new site at the west end of Southern Avenue. It's the same site. We saw PPEA come in about 6-7 months ago, talked about that site. That's still the preferred site, but we have some hoops to jump through to make that a reality. But right now, that's the plan. Euclid Yard, really right on the heels of beach maintenance facility. Euclid Yard is in pretty bad condition. This is not fully funded in this program. We're not asking for full funding, but we are asking, actually we are at this time, $1.5 million for design in '27 and $13 million will go into '28. This is an essential site for the city, again, for landscape services, public safety, fueling, and public works operations, highway operations for the entire western and northwestern part of the city. This funding would renovate, replace all the facilities on the current site. Again, paying close attention, working with Mr. Adams and Economic Development on what is planned for that area. That could change, but at this point, we need to do something sooner rather than later to keep that work ongoing in those locations. Correction Center renewal. You may recall in past budget years that this was actually funded with $500,000 in FY25, $526, and $527. There's a long story as to how that got to be, but it's a project. It's a project that has a design phase and a construction phase. I really can't use $500,000 incrementally in any way. So what we did was we took the $500 out of those 3 years. We put the design dollars, which is $1.1 million in '28, and then we would come back next year and ask for the balance for construction, which would be $13 million. Within the correctional center, there's a lot of stuff that just can't be maintained anymore. It's in really challenging condition, but you have to do it section by section. So it is, it's a whole list of what you might think are normal small things, but you have to do them all at the same time, all in groups. And so we're going to package it up into a project and give it the love that it needs. New project, first one on the list. Mocha Building Envelope Rehabilitation. So we've talked about this before, and there was a city council report that was provided which talked about some studies that we've done and what we understand about the exterior envelope of the building, the roof, the curtain wall, the storefront windows and doors. Are we leaking water right now? No. Could we start leaking in the near future? Yes. So it's time to replace those things, just like replacing the windows on your home or your door. It can't be fixed with paint anymore. Also, the concern with repointing areas of brick masonry, again, something that isn't normally maintained, but as we start to watch that closely, we're starting to see some areas where that could happen. To correct those things requires $2.3 million to be done as a package, and this current request is to put this money in fiscal year 27. And my last new project is the Leroy Road impound lot and remedial action. Probably the first thing I started to work on when I got here in the summer of 2015. You'll remember this was a Virginia Beach Police Department firing range that closed some years ago, and it had contaminated soil from the firing activities that took place there. We got ourselves enrolled in the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality Voluntary Remediation Program, have gone through the study and the design phase, and now we're ready to remove contaminated soil in some areas, others get encapsulated, monitoring wells get put in, and then we turn that into an improved Virginia Beach Police Department motor vehicle impound lot. So right now they're kind of parking cars on the hill and a little bit on the bottom. We can meet the objectives of remediating the environmental hazard and giving them a better place to park for $1.4 million. And this is something that we have to do. The state is requiring us to take care of this, maybe not in this particular situation, but we don't have a choice about whether or not we remediate this site. Projects underway in conclusion. Again, new City Hall moving in between now and June. It is open to the public as of this morning, and if you haven't gone over there and walked in, I invite you to do so. If you'd like a tour, now that it is open, please give me a holler. The operations facilities renovations for Building 2, now Building 3 and 11. Building 2 will be done in the summer of 2023. Again, we are awaiting the shipment of a lot of electrical equipment that is just delayed because of the delay of stuff, and that added quite a significant amount of time to that project. Building 1, or now Building 3, this building will also finish at the same time. So as soon as we get moved out of here, I'm coming into this building and we'll start to demolish it. And it's a 14-month construction window from the time we start demolition until we move planning and public utilities back from their leased facilities into here. And then Building 11, where the police come out of, as soon as they move out, we'll start demolishing that building and Public Works, and a portion of IT will move into that building in the summer of 2024, and then we'll be back. Also a reminder that Owls Creek and Marsh Pavilion Veterinary Care Center opens in early July. It's going to be an exciting time at the aquarium when that happens. Burton Station Fire EMS opens in late July, early August. Again, we already talked about Judicial Center Escalator, which would open or be done in the spring of 24. The ARPA projects, again, the Parks and Rec HVAC, the Central Utility Plant HVAC, again, Courts Building, Direct Digital Control, Parks and Rec Construction Yard, and then our Shuttered Venues Grant, Virginia Aquarium Marine Animal Care Center, Animal Holding Facility, all funded with other people's money that came to us because of the circumstances we've been through, and it's been wonderful. They're all in design right now, so I don't have completion dates for those, but I'll be updating you, and I'm very sensitive on the time we have to spend the ARPA funds and the Shuttered Venues Grant stuff. So I'm sure you may have a number of questions on things. Happy to entertain them at this time.
Rosemary.
Very exciting. Is there any update of when we might actually be able to start having council meetings next door?
Right now, the best estimate is the middle of June. So here's what happened. The same international chip shortage that is hurting everyone in the electronics world hit us. All the information technology equipment is in the building. Information technology was absolutely fabulous working with us. All the building stuff is done, but the audio-visual equipment that has the chips in it is only here in pieces. And so we're working with the vendor who's working with the supplier, who's working with the manufacturer to give us updates on it's several thousand items of things that have to come together to make this happen. And they really believe that it would be late May to early June when it gets here. Obviously, those that operate that equipment need some time for us to install it and practice on it. But at this point, we're looking at mid-June. I'm sorry about that. I wish I could do something about it, but we're caught up in that.
Okay, Guy, and then Rocky, then Barbara.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Nichols. I know it's been a busy time for you. I don't know how you juggle all these projects, particularly one. City Hall, we're all looking forward to being in there, and it's a beautiful building. Thank you. I want to just ask about Mocha. I've not talked to the director recently, nor to you about that, but I know that she had very serious concerns because of her schedule in terms of the accreditation process for the museum and the safety of the items that would be displayed in the museum and the functioning of the entire museum in that context. I'm just wondering, have you had discussions directly with the director about that?
I have. So now, the reaccreditation timing really, Mocha starts that on about the 1st of June in 2023, and they have a period of about 16, 17 months through the fall of 24, where they do their institutional self-study. So they look at everything they do, and it's a whole spectrum of things, facilities being one of them. And they submit that per the American Association of Museums guidelines. That gets submitted on the 1st of November of 2024. So from June of 23 to November of 24, they're working on that. Then in the spring of 25, during the month of March, they come out and they do a site visit. And then on the end of June of 25, they issue a statement. It is probable, but not certain, that the building envelope condition that it's in right now could present some risk to that. So it would be most advantageous if we were able to afford to correct most of those deficiencies prior to the completion of that study for their.
So I can speak to that. And Mr. Mayor, to Councilmember Tower, once staff became aware of that email that Ms. Ryan sent, we weren't initially told about that timeline to that succinct level when we put together the proposed budget. So I huddled staff together, and it's not something that we would need to look at specifically for this year, but I do think the 27 timeline of when we initially proposed needs to be reconsidered to possibly move forward as part of the next year's capital budget. It's probably likely that we need to move it forward into fiscal year 24 to start at least the first part of that work, which will be to do the roof. So that's something that staff has penciled in for further review to propose possibly an acceleration of that timeline for the next budget.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I think that's important if we possibly can do that. And I assume that's probably the quickest we could do it anyway, given time lags. But thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Rocky, and then Barbara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, I hate to keep plowing up the same old ground here, but we've heard two chief judges talk about this escalator replacement. And we heard testimony earlier from Judge Lilly about it being a 30-plus-year-old building. And we're looking at $10 million, and it won't be done for 2 years to put an escalator in place in that building. And I don't know how people movers work. I don't know what the mechanics are behind it. But is that the only option, is to sink $10.5 million into that escalator to move people up and down? Or what are our options? That just seems like a lot of money for an escalator.
Okay, so the building was designed to move 80% of the people in the building via escalator, and only 20% via elevator, and those were mostly building staff and people with handicap conditions that couldn't use the escalator. So the escalator, the 8 of them, is the prime mover. I guess it's the right amount of money. I know it seems like a big number, but it is not an unfair price in any way. So if we're going to continue to operate in that building really for any time at all, we've got to replace it.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. Thank you,
Barbara.
I think that escalator's been wrong since the day the building opened.
Well, it was not a heavy-duty commercial elevator to begin with, and really, I've had an electrician at that escalator every day since I got here in 2015, resetting the escalator continuously throughout the day. So and part of the thing is if you were to go out and come down the escalator like a young child does sometime and jump up and down on the touchpad at the end, it just stops. And the repair guy needs to come out and take the panel off the end and reset it, and it goes. So it's that type of thing. It's not hazardous in any way. It just stops a lot, and then it's just metal stairs that aren't particularly convenient.
It seems like we missed a shot at it 30 years ago when we didn't get the original contractor to come back and do something about it.
Yeah,
but that wasn't my question.
Yes, ma'am.
When you were making your comments, you used the word demolish when you were talking about this building and also 23. Now, we're not demolishing these buildings. You want to clarify?
Yes, I have misspoke. We are taking the interior of this building down to nothing but columns and concrete decks in order to remove all of the hazardous material that is in the walls above the ceiling. There wasn't a way to do a partial renovation of this building because of the asbestos contamination from the fireproofing material. So that'll happen. It'll look a lot like a parking garage in here, similar to what Building 2 was like when we did that interior demolition. There'll be a time when we get done with that. It'll be kind of fun to walk in here and look at what it's like when it's like that. Then we will rebuild it. But the entire exterior envelope of the building stays in place. It does not change in any way. It'll look just like it looks now.
Make plain to everybody that that's what's going to happen. Back on the Leroy Road lot, when that was first discovered that there were problems, there was a concern that it maybe had gotten into the water and so forth, and we let the community know that it was an issue. I'm assuming that it turned out that there was nothing beyond this particular mound.
Correct. None of the testing showed any of the water that had moved into the Foxfire neighborhood, or any contamination had moved into the groundwater in the Foxfire neighborhood.
So all of it was just confined to this mound, and so that what you're doing now is going to clarify all of that, and it won't be a problem anymore.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just to be sure that we did follow through and know that we can assure the people around there that there was no contamination beyond this point.
Now, as far as part of this process too, Department of Environmental Quality will require that we do a public announcement of the construction, which would likely lead to a public session or public hearing. So if there are, again, residents that have concern about the work, they can come in and talk to us and to the designers of the project and get more clarity.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Hey, thanks a bunch. You have an awesome responsibility. Just keeping the city in a lot of ways on life support with, we're an aging city, both in terms of infrastructure, buildings, and, people my age. But once again, you are just doing a tremendous job. And I'll tell you what, I think the new building, as we say, this is going to be the people's building. It took a while, but guess what? It's going to deliver. Thank you very much for your efforts.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, David German from our Transportation Division will give you an update on our roads race CIP.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Dyer, members of City Council, City Manager Dehaney. Appreciate the opportunity to come and present the FY23 CIP to council today. We've got a pretty brief agenda. We'll move through this quickly in the interest of time. We'll start off with our funding summary. I always like to start there just to break down the CIP a little bit more. You'll note, as in years past, our biggest section here is our congestion relief and capacity improvements. That's just a little less than 50%, 45% there with $94.5 million. And you can see the other three remaining categories: safety improvements, special projects, and maintenance projects. So our total city funding for years 1 through 6 adds up to $209.1 million, and that encompasses 57 total projects and programs. So if we take that funding and we roll that in with our state and federal contributions there, you'll note we have a total of about $108 million between those two categories, state and federal. That makes up about 34% of our total funding, with the city funding coming in at 66%. So our total for years 1 through 6 ends up being $317 million. And our total cost, if we had all the money in the world that we needed, would be $1.3 billion to fund every project in the roadway program. So we have a large program. So let's talk about projects with no changes. We'll go through these quickly, but just to kind of highlight, there's 28 projects total in here, and you'll note as we go through, there's about half, a little less than half, 15 of the 28 have some form of state and federal funding on those. So that's funding outside of the program. So that's a good thing for us, and we just like to note that as we go through those projects. And also the next slide shows programs with no change, and of these 11 programs, 4 of those have state and federal funding. In particular, number 8 is our traffic safety improvement program that covers a lot of our federal grant programs, smaller grant projects where we have matching grants are covered in that program. So talk about new programs. We have actually 2 new projects and 1 new program introduced this year in the CIP. The first one we'll move to is Atlantic Avenue pedestrian improvements. This is from 42nd to 83rd Street, not to be confused with the Atlantic Avenue refresh project from 9th Street to 25th Street. This one is basically going to provide pedestrian and bicyclist improvements with ADA ramps, crosswalks, LED warning signs, mid-block flashing beacons, so a lot of good ped improvements. This has been coordinated with the Resort Area Mobility Plan, and the total cost on this is $1.2 million. Next project for consideration is the relocation of the 19th Street and Pacific Avenue signal. This is simply a relocation of the existing signal at 19th Street to 20th Street. Again, with the development in that area, 19th Street eventually being closed, that signal needs to be moved, and this is the time to do it. Total cost on that is $1.2 million. The last new program that we're asking for this year is the Construction Engineering Inspection Program. This is new. This is a program that really is based on our inspection needs for construction projects. And typically on a city-funded project, we can get away with phased inspections where our inspector's there for a concrete pour or setting steel. They don't have to be there for every single event that's going on just because we don't have the resources to do that. For state and federally funded projects, they have to be there. There's civil rights paperwork that has to be tracked. There's material paperwork. There's all kinds of things that have to be tracked. So with this, what we found in the past is we've kind of littered CEI in a lot of projects in our program, and we were looking at our costs this year in a way to try to reduce those. We realized that if we could take these costs and we could kind of put them into one program, we could pare that down a little bit and be able to respond to the resource needs instead of having CEI put in kind of as a contingency on so many projects. So even though it's a big number there, $3.5 million, that ultimately is going to save us money overall in the program each year. So instead of having 6 or 7 million scattered throughout the program, we'll have 3.5 in one program, and that ultimately will save us money. So our next slide, we want to talk about projects with changes. As much as I would have liked to put 14 more PowerPoint slides in here, I just couldn't do it. We wanted to summarize all of our changes for you kind of in one slide here. So these are just projects with some major cost or schedule changes. Realistically, there's other projects. This year was a very difficult year for the CIP. We had most everything cost went up, as you're probably going to hear today. We had very few projects where costs went down. Our programming group, engineering support, led by Katie Shannon, did a great job trying to rein these costs in and get everything programmed. But you'll note here, there's a lot of significant increases, and that's material. We'll talk about that a little bit here in a second. But a lot of these you can see 11, 15%, not uncommon. Some of the smaller projects you'll note have some fairly significant increases. Some of that have been some scope changes. A lot of that has been related to stormwater improvements. I'm telling people there's no such thing as a simple sidewalk project anymore. It's a sidewalk project with a stormwater component to it, and that's driving a lot of the costs up as we get into these projects. So those are things that we're just having to wrestle with and work through on the design side. Also, again, material cost increases. If we have a lot of pipe on a project, like Shore Drive, one down there at the bottom, large pipe, that's driving a lot of cost increases, a lot of stormwater quality structures. Those have been, costs have been going up significantly on that. So I wanted to put in just some information on some of the drivers. This is maybe anecdotal, but it kind of helps paint the picture of what we're dealing with. And just showing you some of the major cost drivers that we've seen over the course of from December 20 to December 21. This probably comes as no surprise. You've seen it, but it kind of puts some numbers to this as far as steel. That's one of the big cost drivers. I think Tom mentioned on his for the escalators. It's fallen in that same category. Certainly fuel costs have gone up. Diesel fuel is no exception. Any metals, aluminum, copper, brass, truck transport, even construction equipment itself is going up. One of the indices that we've looked at is this producer price index. This is provided from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and essentially that's the cost that the producer of the material charges to the vendor. So if I'm a supplier, my steel cost going to a contractor, that's what I'm charging them. So they monitor that. In that same time period, they're showing almost a 20% increase. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to us that we're seeing some of these larger increases on our projects. As far as schedules go, we do have some schedule drivers as well. We've taken a look at most of our projects and tried to re-baseline them, not based on what we think or we hope is going to happen, but historically what we've seen. And so that's caused a lot of the schedules to slide to the right. But the reality is it's taken longer for review submittals, it's taken longer for permitting, it's taking longer for procurement. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, and we could talk about those all day, but the reality is that's where they are right now. So we're trying to make sure our schedules reflect reality so we can ensure we deliver projects on time. There's also the continued material availability that also affects schedules, and certainly the volatility of the supply chain that is ongoing. So just to talk about a few accomplishments, I'm going to skip through that slide. You can look at that later. One project our operations group completed recently was the rehabilitation of the Punka Ferry Bridge. That was an important project with the deck overlay, bearing replacements, and expansion joint replacements. That project was completed again in March for a total cost of $3.9 million. And also the Nemo Parkway Phase 2A. This is the roundabout hanging into the Vet Care Center. This was also completed in March with a total cost of $3 million. And then finally, when we talk about some challenges, certainly I wanted to highlight resources being a challenge, and there's a lot of different things when you say resources, but one of the things I want to impress upon council right now is that there's a lot of big projects going on in the area. When we talk about the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, that's a $3.8 billion project. We talk about the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, that's an $800 million project. So between those two projects alone, you have almost $5 billion worth of work going on. That's a lot of bandwidth that's getting sucked up when it comes to engineers and project managers and contractors and SWAM subs and just responsiveness in general. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind as we talk about costs and schedules and things like that. And in addition to that, when we talk about cost increases, we're running into scenarios with contractors where we talk about being able to just hold prices. When you talk steel, that's one of those things where you submit a price at bid time, and in some cases, the contractor may not get the actual price until the material is delivered. That could be 6 or 8 months down the road. So if you're a contractor, you've got to figure out how you price that risk into your bid. So we're trying to find ways to help with that. We don't want to give the farm away from the city's perspective, but our goal is not to have a contractor go bankrupt financing our work. So we're trying to be fair about that and working with the city attorney's office to find some ways we can do that contractually. And then finally, we want our schedules to reflect reality, as I mentioned earlier. So when we have trouble getting material, we may find that although construction's scheduled to start, we may have to delay the actual work because we can't get pipe until, say, 4 months down the road. We're finding that with reinforced concrete pipe, it may not get here for 4 months. So there's no sense in opening up a road or shutting it down until we know we've got some of these critical materials on site. That's not going to be good for anybody. So we're trying to be smart about that. And then finally, we just make sure we're managing expectations and communicating changes to our leadership and the council as well. So, and with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions, Michael?
Thank you. I have a question that's related to a project in my district, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to bring it up, and that's the Lynnhaven Parkway corridor improvement. Is that part of this CIP discussion?
Is that the Lynnhaven, the sense of arrival project that we talked about?
It's not a roadways project, but it's a streetscape
I believe
improvement
that's an economic
sidewalk
development.
project.
Is that right?
It's an economic
Yeah,
development.
it's an economic development, yes,
Thank
sir. We're managing that, so, I mean, I don't know if there's something we
Well,
can.
then I think it is appropriate to bring
Sure,
up. And
sure.
and I've shared this, my thoughts on this with various members of city staff, and I want to state them publicly here today. There have been many reasons for the delay of this project, and for the public who are watching, the Lynnhaven Parkway Improvement Project is one that was dates back to, I think, 2016 or 2017. Those of you who are on council before me will be able to attest to it. It's not one that I was part of initiating, but it's incredibly important to the Lynnhaven Business District corridor. Provides that sense of arrival, as you noted, provides really outstanding streetscape improvements that improve mobility, It improves the appearance of the area. It helps to promote a sense of identity and sense of place for Lynnhaven, which, as I noted at a previous meeting, is in many ways, an underappreciated asset within our city. Continues to perform through recessions, in good times and bad times. Lynnhaven district and the people who work and own businesses there continue to deliver for our city and provide jobs and a reliable stream of revenue for our city. And so it's really incumbent upon us to be considerate and respectful of their place in our city, and for a variety of reasons, including, of course, the May 31st tragedy, which I know we're all very sensitive about, and understanding of this project has been delayed and delayed and delayed, and it's time to get the project started. I think what's delaying it is a number of easements. I think we need to accelerate our efforts to obtain those easements and move this project forward and get it done. The person who preceded me on council really asked me to help shepherd this project through. We were not able to break ground during her term, and I would like to see progress made this before I complete my first term. And so my respectful request to the manager and to staff is to let's get this thing going and let's get this done for Lynnhaven District. Thank you.
Understood.
Okay, Rosemary.
When do we think Laskin Road is going to be finished?
Laskin Road, the VDOT project, I believe was scheduled to be completed next spring, if I'm not mistaken. But let me check with them to get an update, because I know they've had some delays and they don't always get reported until later in the project. So let me follow up on that.
Okay. Linwood?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm going to talk about Laskin Road real quick, and just would like you to double check something, David, if you would. But if you're coming east on Laskin Road, so on the left-hand side where that bike path is going to be, about 600 yards shy of Birdneck Point neighborhood, that bike path was left out of the original project.
Correct.
Do you know if that's in now and we're going to complete that bike path to Birdneck Point?
What I know is we've talked with VDOT about that. We've raised the issue. They have. We've actually given them some survey data on that to help them put together an estimate for that. My understanding is they've estimated that. They've talked internally and said that they are going to fund that. It's going to happen. However, they're waiting to go to the CTB one more time. I think they get one more lick on the lollipop to get some more funding, and that's what they're going to do, is include that request in with their overall request for some additional funding for that.
If that isn't going to be coordinated with the completion of that road project, could you bring that to our attention and the city manager's attention? Because if not, we're going to force bicycles into traffic for about 600 yards into oncoming traffic, and
Agreed.
That cannot be acceptable.
Yeah, we had a long conversation with VDOT. They always get on us about logical termini, and we just thought logical termini in a driveway doesn't make too much sense there. So I think they understood
I
that.
appreciate you
Yes, sir.
paying close attention to that one. And my second question is, I get questions from time to time about our milling and repaving schedule for roads.
Mhm.
Is that done on a time schedule or a inspection schedule, or how do we do that?
I'm gonna let Philip Cutter or LJ answer that. I don't want to misspeak.
Councilman, that's actually done through our operations department as opposed to the engineering department. Periodically, about every 5 years, we do an evaluation of all of the roads inside of our roadway network. And that evaluation gives us a score for each roadway segment. And a roadway segment might not be the entirety of Virginia Beach Boulevard, but it might be a segment of Virginia Beach Boulevard. That score is evaluated, compared against each other, and that helps us put together our schedule for how we're doing repaving. So it's not a, we try very much to make it a metric-driven decision. However, saying that a lower score on a Virginia Beach Boulevard a higher score on Virginia Beach Boulevard might rank ahead of a lower score on a Viking Drive, for instance, because of just the number of vehicles that travel it every day. But it does go into that determination. The score is what drives it,
It's an
as opposed to.
inspection-based
Yes, sir.
process.
And
Okay.
it's done every 5 years, which we're getting ready to kick off our next one, I think within the next 6 months or so.
Thank you, LT.
Hey, anyone else? Barbara?
It's really nice to see that your two completed roadway projects are both in the Princess Anne District.
It just worked out that way.
The rehabilitation of Punka Ferry Bridge, of course, that's different from the bond referendum to raise the road.
Correct.
But this project had the potential of causing a lot of confusion, but it went very smoothly. And good planning, and really appreciate all the work that went into getting that done.
And that was our Public Works Operations group with Philip Cutters out there.
Great job, a great scheduling, those weekends to be closed, and it all had to be worked out with the fire departments and everybody, and y'all did a great job. I never had any complaints. And it's good to see this little roundabout finished. Now we just have to get used to how to use it and so forth, but thank you for that. But what's missing here is the Princess Anne 7 project that is going to get completed.
It is going to get completed, yes, ma'am. We've met with the contractor, and again, still kind of waiting on some information from Virginia Natural Gas. But the majority of the job, we believe, will be substantially completed here in early May. That's our goal right now. Definitely get out of there before tourist season gets ramped up.
I was going to say, especially that Sandbridge intersection.
Yes, ma'am.
Before we get into the Memorial Day stuff. So it's still that.
Yes, ma'am.
Other one, but thank you. It's going to happen eventually. On these major cost schedule changes, I know Elbow Road B and C, that was going to start this year for B, but it's rescheduled to start next year because you're going to put both of them together.
Correct.
And that's why they're on this list. So that for Elbow Road will be next year beginning. But what is this one on the projects with no change? What's Phase 2D for Elbow Road?
That's the other piece. That's the sister 2 lanes. The one we're doing right now, B and C, go up to Margaret Drive, Salem essentially. So from Salem heading back towards the amphitheater would be the other 2 lanes. That would be the other portion, Phase D, where, where the amphitheater, where it necks down the 2 lanes, it would widen that out. So Elbow Road would be 4 lanes all the way from Princess Anne to Indian River Road.
That is just another full
phase.
And
That's right.
Okay, I was thinking it was going to go everything, but there is a D.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then Indian River Road, that's slid back another year, and that both of those phases are going to be done together, and therefore they will begin in '24.
Correct.
Didn't these 2 roads also experience some kind of glitch with state funding, but all that's been worked out? Is that correct?
It has been worked out when we had with the revenue share funding. I don't think Indian River, I think Elbow was impacted by that, but we've worked that out with VDOT, yes.
Okay, so with both of these projects, the funding is worked out and everything. It's just the rescheduling because of putting those projects together.
Correct. Everything's resolved now.
Very good.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else at this point?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Aaron.
I just want to say thank you, Dave. I know Dustin in your office, who's in charge of the Rosemont Road widening project, I had a lot of concerns and questions from the constituents in Rosemont Road, which is District 10, my district. And Dustin got back to their inquiries and questions very, very quickly. And I just want to say thank you for that. I know that's scheduled in the CIP for 2025, I believe.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll pass that along to staff. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Dehaney, I got to tell you this. It seems between the stormwater and flood protection, buildings and roads, we got a lot of moving parts going on all over the city in terms of improving infrastructure. Kudos to you and your group.
Thank you, sir.
All right, moving on.
At this time, Mayor, we'll be joined by our HR Director, Regina Hilliard, and she's going to
Hi,
give an update
Regina.
on Human Resources budget requests.
Afternoon, Mayor. Good afternoon, members of the City Council. I am pleased to present the proposed budget for the Department of Human Resources. And this slide shows the divisions within our department. We are, of course, primarily an internal services department, providing support to our employees and the managers. But we do also provide staff support to 3 boards or commissions. Those are the Investigation Review Panel, the Personnel Board, and the Human Rights Commission. And we show the Human Rights Commission up here because we do have one staff person whose primary job duties are associated with providing support to that commission. So that is why that is reflected there. There are two things I wanted to point out on this slide. First is what you see in red. That is the member communications program and the associated manager. That is responsible for our citywide employee communications. That is moving from the Department of Human Resources to our communications office. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that you'll see an increase in one position in staffing and compensation. The proposed budget provides an analyst in that division to help engage in more proactive recruiting, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. As for some of our major initiatives, you will recall the recommendation from the Hillard-Hines report to centralize the employee relations functions that were being performed in several departments across the city. So with the positions that City Council has provided to our department over the last couple of years, we have been able to centralize over half of our employees to be part of the employee relations centralized function now. So what that means is that HR is immediately involved in any disciplinary issues that may occur in those departments. And with Human Resources being involved faster, you should be seeing more consistency in the discipline that occurs in that department as well as across the city. Also, for those centralized departments, Human Resources would handle the administrative investigations that need to occur in those departments. So these are investigations that would not involve illegal discrimination or harassment, but they do involve things that can impact the morale of employees working there. So HR, Employee Relations, would handle those investigations. For all departments, even those that are not centralized, Human Resources would handle all investigations that do involve illegal harassment or discrimination. And we would handle any workplace violence investigations that need to be looked into. And associated with that, we have formalized the threat assessment team that was recommended in the Hillard-Hines report as well. We have also centralized oversight for the family medical leave. This is something that has been performed by all of the departments. We're centralizing this just to make sure that we have strict adherence to this federal law. Also, we're in a very competitive hiring environment, to say the least. So we have focused on some things that we can do to enhance our ability to attract candidates. One of those is reducing time to hire. And primary among that effort involves the fact that we've changed our hiring dates. So it used to be that we would hire at the start of a pay period. Pay periods start basically every other week. Now we are hiring every week. We're bringing in new employees on a weekly basis, and that we started doing that in January. We've also implemented more hiring bonus programs and more stipends. And further down on that chart, you'll see the electronic routing of correspondence. And this is important for us because we implemented the electronic routing of correspondence during the height of the pandemic. And it was done so that we could sustain efficiency regardless of whether someone was working in the office or if they were working remotely. Well, more recently, we've expanded this to include communications between Human Resources and the City Manager's office. This has greatly expedited the approvals that we will need from the deputy city managers or from the city managers to approve these exceptions to hiring that we need to make, or exceptions to allow us to retain our employees. So this has really expedited things. We're seeing 24-hour turnaround, and this is greatly needed to make sure that we can get the employees in the door or retain what we do have. And of course, we're excited to see the impact that implementation of the market salary survey will have on our hiring and retention. The last thing I wanted to mention on this slide is that we do have a new working conditions platform. This helps to ensure our adherence to the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, and it also supports our return to work efforts. So, for example, we will identify for every position that we have, we'll identify what work functions are required. So if there is prolonged standing, prolonged walking, prolonged sitting, whatever it is, we have those things identified on a position-by-position basis in this platform. And this helps us when we are having to do accommodations for those who have disabilities or to help our employees return to work after they have had an injury that may have occurred on or off the job. As for new initiatives, the proposed budget, as I mentioned, includes an additional position to help provide more aggressive focus on recruitment. So this will allow us to focus on pipelines, for example, that we would like to initiate for getting our candidates through the door. So for example, networking sites or social media sites. We want someone to be there monitoring those sites so we can enhance our ability to get applications from them and hopefully make hires. This person would follow up on warm leads from candidates who may have applied for other positions. Maybe they were not successful for those positions, but we want them to retain their interest in employment with our city. They would initiate cold leads. So maybe it's someone who never considered the city as an employer. We want them to know the benefits of working with us. So this person would be out there making known what positions we have available. And they would also build closer working relationships with colleges, universities, and other educational institutions so that we can be front of mind for those educational institutions as well. Of course, we have minimum wage going up again. That will be increasing to $12 in January of 2023. The primary impact for this will be our part-time positions. We do have a few full-time, but primarily it's going to be part-time. So we'll be working with the departments that are impacted there. And we are in the initial stages of procuring a human capital management program. And Kevin Fairley spoke to this, I think it was last week, so I won't belabor this, but I do want to say that, you know, this was a system that was put into place in 2009. And you can imagine the technology changes that have occurred since that time. And this was a system that was bought prior to that, but it was just implemented for HR in 2009. A newer system should provide us with better accounting of positions or position control and overall better reporting and management of employee data. So we are certainly looking forward to continuing work on obtaining that system. Are there any questions?
Okay, Rocky?
No question, just more of a comment. Regina, you and your folks have done an outstanding job over the past year because it's been tough dealing with all these vacancies and everything. And I just want to let you know that you hadn't grown weary in well doing. So keep up the good work and all the new initiatives. I mean, we had the VB Time come online. We had all of the vacancies we've been dealing with. So thank you and your staff because you've been doing a great job.
Thank you, and I will certainly relay that.
Yes, ma'am.
It means a lot.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Yes, on the minimum wage issue,
Mm-hmm.
how many people do we have at minimum wage at the $11 level at this point?
So we had to increase, do you remember the number we increased to $11 by any chance? I don't remember the number that we actually brought up to 11, but at this point we only had, when we increased to $12 an hour, we only have fewer than 20 full-time individuals that we will have to increase to the $12. So not very many that we are having to increase on the full-time. But on part-time, we do have a number that we will have to increase. We're anticipating that to get to the $12 an hour, we will have a cost of somewhere around $225,000 for getting them up to the $12 an hour. But we're already at the 11, and that has already been implemented.
Pretty well work into it. Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, Glenwood.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we are looking at this with the Process Improvement Committee, and you guys came to us last meeting, and I commend you all for taking a look at everything and what do we need to do to be, as you say, more competitive with the other cities, because I think we're down almost 1,000 employees out of a 7,000 employee organization. It's pretty stunning when you think about it, and I think the council is going to step up to the plate with the compensation issue in this budget, but anything else that we need to do, I hope you will make recommendations on it and bring it forward, because it's tough out there. We can't afford to lose one person, and we need to make sure that we can get people. And to me, if we need to do anything, just let us know, because we've got to get this workforce back up and running properly to give the best customer service we can.
Appreciate that.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
No, Rosemary?
I wanted to ask a question about the hybrid plan. Is this the time to ask it, or is it, should I wait for a different time?
Vice Mayor, we plan to brief City Council next week on it, so, but obviously, we work for you, so if you want to ask us a question now, we certainly can.
Well, I can ask it now to get the information, because she's not going to have the information right at this
Understood.
moment. So my question is, on the hybrid plan, if we could get the number for the step plan, if it's years of service instead of what's proposed, because I think it would be an increased amount.
Yeah, so I got that information came to me today as well, and I think Regina and her staff are planning to meet with some of the associations to get an input on what they're requesting. So we'll try to see if we can get some information on what it would cost to do years of service in lieu of time and grade. Yeah, it's substantially more money, but we'll give you an idea. We could probably give them an idea what it looks like. Monica, Regina. Okay.
Sure. That's kind of what I want to ask it in advance. So
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, and thanks again for your exceptional work, and, please convey to your staff our appreciation.
I certainly will. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, Director Knight, our new libraries director, will give you an update on the proposed budget for the libraries.
Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Two-week anniversary.
It's actually 3 weeks. So I'm hopefully a little bit more prepared, so thank you. And I just wanted to thank you all for having me. City Manager Duhaney, Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Wilson, and all of the City Council. So I've had a whole 3 weeks to get to know this budget. Luckily, my wonderful staff is here to support me if I come up short. So, let's see. Where do I point this?
Oh, you just click it.
It's got good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me help you.
Hey, there you go.
I did it.
Oh, no, Terry did it. Terry will do it for you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Terry will do it for you. Just let her know when you want it to see.
Okay. So right here, you'll see that the library, again, I want to thank you for keeping us whole this year. We've got one of the reasons why I wanted to come here is we have a 98% satisfaction rating from our community, and we thank you for a healthy budget for us to continue to do that great work. As you can see, we have 241 and a half FTEs and 14 divisions, which include our central library, our joint use library, 7 area libraries, our programming and outreach department, support services, admin and public records, the law library, and our Friends of the Library, which represents our Fund 818. So, I'm ready. Let me see if I can do, oh, she did it. Okay, so this is this pictorial breakdown of our budget. As you can see, the lion's share is in our salary and our benefits. Then the next thing is our materials budget. And then we put the reading glasses on. And then we continue on down through our operations, and you see that we do get a nice budget from our friends of the library with their 112,000 or so of donations, and not pictured on the last slide was the wonderful work of our foundation that is also projecting to give us approximately 85,000 this year. So on this slide, as you can see, pretty much everything is staying the same, as our budget is not changing a whole lot for the proposed year, fiscal year 23. But you do see in programming and community outreach that there is a drop in the number of FTEs for that department, and that's because we've done a restructuring to put more people and more experts into the programming and outreach area, and we've sent some of our experts to the libraries to also continue programming and outreach at the local branch level. So we've got a system-wide team of experts who do programming for large events and large outreach for the entire city, as well as librarians in each branch. But other than that, pretty much everything stayed the same here. Thank you. So some major changes and initiatives that we have had going on at the library is that last year we continue restructuring our public services and outreach, as I just mentioned on the last slide. And we've also continued, and we're getting to the end of phase 2 of our renovations, which is $5.8 million of capital improvement programs. Our oceanfront library had their drive-in open up early March, and then we're hoping in the next couple of weeks or so to reopen the oceanfront library that has had some updates to their carpeting, windows, and the renovations have gone through all of our branches, not all of our branches, 8 of our branches, including Princess Anne, Bayside, Kempsville, Central Library, and Punga Blackwater in 2020, and also Windsor Woods in 2021. So, okay. Initiatives that are still underway and approaching conclusion is our Career Online High School. And you'll see one of our happy graduates. They actually get a high school diploma. That program is being expanded. And we have updated our Storytime curriculum to the whole child model. And we're continuing with our inclusive programming, especially for those with disabilities, and with our English Conversation Club and other programs at the Central Library and Joint Use, which have our highest number of residents who speak other languages at home. So after 3.5 weeks, that's what I have. Any questions for me?
Pretty good for just 3.5 weeks. Way to go. Okay. Any questions? Boy, you hit a home run.
Wow,
There
you guys are letting me off easy, but thank you, and I'm so.
Wait till next year.
Fair.
Yeah.
I will just add, as the liaison to the library, what a pleasure it is to have Ms. Knight here. I think I welcomed you the last time at the podium, but I think this program about the expanded high school is one we want to make sure we get published far and wide. It's a good program and one that we need to make sure everybody knows about.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, Director LeBeau, our Cultural Affairs Director, will come and present on Cultural Affairs proposed budget requests.
Hi, Emily. How you doing?
It's wonderful to see you all, members of council, mayor, city manager. Thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to present the operating budget for the Cultural Affairs Department. We have appreciated all of your support. The department oversees the Arts and Humanities Commission and operates the history museums and coordinates the public art program, provides contract management for the Sandler Center, and serves as liaison to Mocha, the Vibe District, and lots of other local cultural organizations. There's 3 divisions and 12 FTEs. Our operating budget covers the administration of the Arts and Humanities Commission and the history museums, operating support to Virginia Mocha and the Sandler Center, And you'll see that in FY22, there was a one-time expense in the Sandler Center budget, which represents the 11% decrease from FY22 to FY23. The TIP funding represents marketing support to Mocha, and at the request of the Resort Advisory Commission and the Oceanfront Enhancement Committee, includes funding for the installation of a permanent projection station at 24th Street Park to provide immersive storytelling, family-friendly experiences at the resort using innovative light, sound, and digital imagery. 74% of our budget comes from the general fund and is used for facility operations and grants to community cultural organizations. The remaining 26% is funded through the TIP. So cross-racial and cross-cultural programming is one of the priorities of our work. We're expanding programming for Juneteenth and year-round Black History panel discussions with partners from Norfolk State University and the Princess Anne County Training School Union Kempsville High School alumni. The alumni also play an important role in our Immortal Performance Poetry program with Teens with a Purpose, where alumni and youth share their life experience and youth use the conversation to create spoken word and poetry. The final Immortal Showcase will take place Sunday, June 24th at the Z at Town Center. In 2020, this body allocated nearly $1 million of the Federal CARES Act funding to create the Virginia Beach CARES Act Arts and Cultural Relief Grant Program, which numerous organizations cite as the reason they are able to be open today and have survived the pandemic. The continued impact of the shutdowns has become known to us even greater during our recent grant deliberations, where requested funds far exceeded the amount the Commission has to allocate. In addition to overseeing the Arts and Humanities Commission, Cultural Affairs also serves as the city liaison to the Vibe and Virginia Mocha. Both organizations continue to bring Virginia Beach national recognition as a cultural destination, with recent articles and publications like Southern Living and Condé Nast Traveler. Next week, Virginia Mocha will welcome a blockbuster exhibition by internationally renowned artist Maya Lin, who at 21 years old created the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Our art projects continue to aid in economic development, tourism, and public safety in Virginia Beach. The mural Oyster Bloom on Shore Drive, right after the exit to the tunnel, creates a new welcoming gateway that is seen by 60% of visitors coming to Virginia Beach. Not only is it a beautiful welcome, it's also converted a poorly lit, drab area into a place residents can safely walk. In the summer of 2021, we launched the first of 3 Brushworks public art partnerships with the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation. This program provides an opportunity for individuals experiencing homelessness to work with professional artists to create art using shipping containers used at the center. Session 2 is planned for this summer. Just last week, students from Bayside Middle School participated in the installation of their artwork, Lift Up Your Voice. That was the culmination of an artist residency partnership between Cultural Affairs and the public schools. We are currently in the design phases for placemaking art installations at the Sports Center and Woodstock Skate Park. 2 of our museums, the Thurgood House and the Princess Anne County Training School, Union Kempsville High School, reopened to the public as pandemic restrictions lifted. The 2 others, the Francis Land House and the Lynnhaven House, remain closed due to restorations that have been more extensive than originally expected due to numerous issues discovered during the restoration process. We were still able to use the grounds at Lynnhaven House for bonfires and brews, which was a new event that drew more than 600 people. We've had great success in our other programs, including sold-out holiday teas, ghost tours at Thurgood House in the weeks around Halloween. We continue the Saplings Education Program with the public schools and have seen steady growth in private event rentals. The success of our public programs demonstrate the community has an appetite for experiencing these historic sites in new revenue-generating ways. So in conclusion, I wanted to highlight a few significant initiatives for the future. We are nearing the completion of an interpretive plan for the 3 historic sites, which has included extensive public input thus far. And more public input is planned for the summer as we wrap up the plan. The final item I want to highlight for you today is to acknowledge the work of the 531 Memorial Committee, including our 2 council liaisons, Councilmember Wooten and Berlucci. The council-appointed committee began meeting in February with a focus on determining a respectful way to memorialize those lost on May 31st, 2019, and those left to carry on with the scars because of that day. This committee's work is profound, and we are grateful for their willingness to engage in this process. The next steps in the committee's work are to hold a public input session on the evening of Wednesday, April 27th at the Convention Center, as well as special and respectful ways in which city staff can share their input. More information will be shared very soon. A public survey is also planned in the near future. And those families most impacted are at the forefront of our minds, and the family and survivors liaisons have established communication channels from the start of the committee's work and will continue as we move forward to ensure their voices are heard and respected. So that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Mr. Bellucci.
Thank you, Ms. LeBeaus.
Thank you.
Appreciate your presentation, and I thank you for being here. Of course, as you know, I have the privilege of being the liaison to the Arts and Humanities Commission, as well as to the 531 Memorial Committee, as you noted. And I also have spent the last 11 years working in this field as a professional at the Chrysler Museum of Art. And so as a person who loves the arts and has worked in the arts for many years, and really recognizes the important impact that arts, humanities, culture has on our community, I just want to thank you and your team for the extraordinary work that you do to serve our city.
Thank you.
We often talk about the economic impact of arts and culture on tourism, on jobs, and it certainly does have all of that. And you've presented, as I know, incredible studies and demonstration of those facts and on the positive impact that support for the arts has on our city and our community. But I think, for me, I focus on the intangible impacts. You laid out a variety of programming and initiatives that you and your team have led that they have an impact on our community that is not tangible, that can't be measured, that improves the quality of life, that creates a sense of place, that connects us as neighbors and as members of one community around ideas, around creative expression, around free thought. It's really incredible what the arts can do, and all forms of creative expression. And the work that you and your team do has really helped to place Virginia Beach in a very positive position as we contemplate what our future for arts and culture looks like. And I want to thank you for all that. I'd like to talk a minute about the Arts and Humanities Commission, if I could ask you a question. Would you mind sharing, just for the entire body and for the public, a little bit about what that process looks like, and about what the, because it's very challenging. I had a chance to sit in on the first meeting. It's extremely challenging for the members of that committee who are volunteers to make determinations about which organizations to fund, because they're doing incredible community service work too, these groups that apply for grants. Could you talk a little bit about what resources are available and possibly what the difference in, just about the process and what you could do possibly with more funds?
Thank you. Thanks. So our staff provides grant workshops starting in the fall to provide assistance to staff, volunteers who write the grants. The grant is due in February, the beginning of February, and then the Arts and Humanities Commissioners take many, many weeks reviewing. This past time we had 25 applicants, and the grants are very meaty. And then they come together for 2 days at the end of March, and each applicant is invited to come and present to the commission. The commissioners are available to take questions, and then the commissioners take each group one by one and have very thoughtful conversation and debate about their project. And I mean, they're really bound by not having enough resources to match the amount that's requested. So this year is about 300,000 more than they had to allocate. So they really do a wonderful job of making those tough decisions in a place where they wish that they could fund more to make a greater impact, but just are bound by resources.
And many of the grants you receive are focused on community building, and that's been my experience in review of them. They're focused on underserved constituencies. They're focused on young people. It's not sort of a rarefied, support for this inaccessible performance program. It's very much about education, community service, connecting young people with the arts at a young age, giving them opportunity, exposing them to more things. And I think that limited resources on qualified grant applications is a substantial problem, and one that we'll look at, because, as we contemplate things like youth violence and many of the social challenges that we face now, there's nothing like the programs that the organizations that you interface with are delivering to help to engage young people, alleviate those tensions, connect them with our community. There's nothing better than the work that's happening with those organizations, and so I think it's really important that we consider what that looks like. I'd also like to talk a minute about the historic houses, and I wonder if you could just provide us a little bit of detail. Historic houses are so important because they help us interpret the history of our own community. But something that's interesting that's been happening in historic houses over the last several years is sort of another look at how we interpret those houses and how visitors can experience the homes and consider the stories, a more complete and full picture of the stories who lived there, and in some cases people who were enslaved in the historic houses we have in Virginia Beach. And for a long time, those stories weren't told, and they weren't contemplated, they weren't considered. And there's really incredible work that's being done all over the world, and certainly locally, in order to make historic homes more inclusive, but most importantly, to provide a more complete picture of the history of our community. And I wonder if you could talk about your efforts, which I think have been really good in that area.
So one of the silver linings of COVID is we were given a break and able to focus directly on programming. So for months, we researched and rewrote many different programs, including researching the Native American presence on the historic sites. We developed a new tour that has been very, very well received, the enslaved experience perspective. And those are where we've opened the houses to not just during the day. We're starting to open them on Thursday nights, on Sundays for the very first time. They're free, and we have gotten a really good response in terms of folks that have never been, but are interested in, like you said, hearing the other stories that haven't been told for so long. So it's very, very important. We want to do more, definitely. And I think through the interpretive plan, they've looked and will be providing some recommendations, the consultant, on additional programming.
I'm really glad thank you, and I appreciate your prioritization of that more complete picture. I think it's reflective of the field, new scholarship, but also, most importantly, connecting people who live in Virginia Beach with points of access to their historic resources in a new way that's more relevant to their lives, and I think that's really great. Could you talk a little bit more about the sort of liaison role that your office has with various community organizations, such as Mocha, such as the Vibe, the relationship that you have with arts organizations across the city?
Well, we as Cultural Affairs, we exist to, I feel, support our local arts and cultural organizations. So they're at the forefront of our mind at all times. And so Mocha, the Vibe are such integral parts of our cultural landscape, as well as the many different cultural groups that we have. So if we take the Vibe, for example, they're very active in doing a lot of art-oriented projects in the Vibe. And so Cultural Affairs serves as their liaison between the city infrastructure, trying to help them at all times, trying to get their initiatives implemented. So we're much, hopefully they look at us as support and a resource.
I appreciate that. I think the role that you and your office serve as a supportive entity for cultural organizations, one that provides resources, support, is really important, and I think the maintenance of those relationships is something that I know you prioritize, and I appreciate you for that. I have one final question, and I appreciate everyone's indulgence in this discussion. So I mentioned Mocha and the Vibe, but I also want to talk about other parts of our city and the importance that arts and culture have in sort of being geographically distributed. One of the things that I hear from, of course, I represent District 3, which is right in the middle of the city. I think you and your office have done really, really great work in terms of helping to distribute arts opportunities all across our city, and not focusing them on exclusively on the resort district or what's been perceived as particularly, the more exclusive parts of Virginia Beach who have historically enjoyed greater access to arts. I think we need to make sure that we're making sure that the arts are available to everyone. Could you talk a little bit about some of your efforts there and what your thoughts are for how we can even expand upon that in the future?
Especially, I think now in terms of where the council is headed in terms of the districts, that has been a major priority for us. And I'll give you an example. So I didn't even talk about it today, but a project we're working on are utility boxes in Green Run and Burton Station. So we've paired artists to work with school children in those areas to develop artwork that then will be transferred and will wrap the utility boxes in those neighborhoods. And we've reached out to the civic leagues and kind of keeping them up to date on the project. And the Green Run Association called me one day and she said, okay, this is great, but what are you going to do? What more can you do? So I think it's very important in terms of reaching out, like looking at the Kempsville historic Kempsville plan and how we integrate artwork in all. And they don't have to be huge initiatives, but those grassroots community building projects are so important. So that is definitely a focus.
Thank you. I think you've done great work there, and I'm only so excited for the opportunity to see that even expanded, because the arts are for everyone, everywhere. And I think the work that you do exemplifies that, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Emily.
Well stated, Michael. Anybody else? Aaron?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you go to slide 6 for me?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hopefully. Yes.
I think one more before it might be slide 5. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Before that one. The one with the numbers on there.
I'm sorry?
The one with the numbers on there.
Yeah. Oh, okay. This one? This one?
No,
Are you looking for the pie chart?
no, I was looking for, I wrote it down, but perhaps, it was a 7. Yeah, well, you had a chart up there that stated that you spent out of total requests, 874,000.
Oh, right. That was the Arts and Humanities Commission one. Yes.
There we go. You said that was a total request, and out of 25 applications, that was the total you spent. You said we allocated $1 million towards it.
So that,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was just wondering, did you go through those funds, the total number of money we spent or we allocated towards it?
So the $1 million of CARES grants are not included in those numbers. Those numbers are the FY22 grant allocations.
Okay.
So, fortunately, we were able to distribute $1 million during the COVID shutdown to support the cultural groups. These are based on their grant applications and their projects. But it's a continued issue every year of having a lot more requests than we do the resources.
So following up in that window, you start taking requests in October?
We start the process. So it's a grant workshop, technical assistance type of process. The grants are due in February, the beginning of February.
And being that we're seeing much more need these days, have you all considered opening that process or shrinking it down to match the resources that you have? I'm trying to get an understanding of if we were to allocate more funding to you, would you expand that process, or if we were to make you equal, keep your budget the same, would you try to close that off a little bit, shrink it down?
That's a good question. I think the groups are used to our typical grant process and the grant cycle. So the commissioners reviewed grants that are for projects starting to take place July 1. So if the groups knew that we had additional resources, then they could refine their projects to make sure that they do show growth so that we're justifying providing additional resources to them.
So are you finding by this time of year, are you exhausted your funds?
Yes.
Completely exhausted? Okay. Well, not to be redundant, but thank you for all that you do. And I see the impact that you're having throughout our city, especially the cultural affairs over there in Bayside of Lake Edwards, and throughout our city, especially in the Green Run area. Continue the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your words.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks,
stuff.
everybody.
You got it. Okay, moving on.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, Director Daniel Projan from our Emergency Management Department will be giving an update on emergency management proposed.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me today. While that's getting up on the screen, I just want to talk a little bit about our office. We've had a lot of changes over the last year. So we are very excited to be here to present to you today and talk about our proposed budget and our ongoing initiatives. We have had an active year and hired 6 out of 8 of our new staff in just a matter of months. A year ago today, I actually stood in front of you and had an office of 3 in the middle of mass vaccination operations and had a vision to professionalize our office and evolve our program to meet the demands of a changing climate, more extreme and frequent weather events, and a very complex hazard and threat environment. I am very excited to say a year later, we have done that. We have done just that. We have hired a multidisciplinary team composed of members from all across public safety. We have former fire, law enforcement, also EMS, and then policy level stakeholders as a part of our team. And what that does is that enables us to speak the language of our public safety partners and better contribute to citywide initiatives. I just want to take a moment to actually talk about our staff a little bit and the accomplishments they have had. Our Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator, he just became a certified emergency manager. It's an arduous process and takes a long time to do, so I want to congratulate him on that. Our Mitigation Program Manager, Danielle Spaich, she just received an award by the Virginia Emergency Management Association as for the Mitigation Program of the Year, which is all across the Commonwealth. It's very prestigious. And then our Joe Corley, he came over to us from EMS, and he just completed the FEMA Basic Academy. Those are just some of the examples of the great professionalism of our staff, and I'm very pleased with your support that we're able to have them on our team. I want to say my number one goal as a director and as an emergency manager is to maintain continuity in terms of ongoing disasters, in terms of our staffing, and in terms of maintaining city services during times of disasters. Our team's efforts on a daily basis help to do just that, and we try to keep the city prepared in the event of any type of emergency. So as you can see on the organizational summary chart, we have a total of 8 full-time staff right now. And with the proposed budget, we had 2 additional full-time staff coming on under our security program for a total of just over $1 million for our budget. You can see the breakdown here, but essentially over the last year with the onboarding of Mike Freeman, we have separated out security into a separate division. So that is what's represented on the chart. And you can see here the reflection of 2 additional FTEs, and the changes here reflect the personnel costs as we hired them on over the last 12 months. I'm sure you've seen it firsthand. We've done a lot in the short 8 months that Mike Freeman has been here to enhance the city's physical security infrastructure. I will say Virginia Beach is leading the way here. We were the first to bring on a security program manager for the city out of all of the localities across the Commonwealth. Fairfax County shortly followed suit, and a lot of other neighboring localities are following our suit. So we are serving as a model for Hampton Roads region and also all across the Commonwealth. With that, I do want to talk through some of our initiatives that we have been working on. All of these are part of the Hilliard Heights recommendations that we have been addressing. So with Mike Freeman's addition, we did transition the security services contract from Public Works facilities to emergency management as of December 1, 2021. And we also moved to a new security contractor. So we currently have 37 staff across 11 sites who serve as security personnel, and we have worked really hard to provide enhanced coverage at the Municipal Center complex. We do that through very integrated relationship building and protocols with our police department, also with our sheriff's department. We also have made sure to incorporate roving patrols around the Municipal Center complex and all across the sites that we work at. In addition, at our new City Hall, we are building out a command room which will allow 24-hour monitoring capability, and that will enable us to maintain eyes on our city infrastructure. Just a little data point here for you. Our patrols have averaged about 154 per week per site since they've started. That's an incredible amount, and we know we're working with other sites who have interest in coming on to this program. In addition, Mike Freeman and Allied, in addition to police, they work hard to provide plus-ups for any kind of services that are needed. So, for example, College Beach Weekend, police ask for some additional coverage. And we do try to accommodate that as much as possible. That's just one item here. We are working on facility risks assessment. So we did hire, as a contractor, a SEPTED professional who is working through this as we speak. He completed 1 full assessment already. We have 5 in progress and 3 that have been more targeted based on requests from departments on their concerns. Emergency Management Security has also coordinated with police and human resources as a part of that threat assessment team to address any concerns that have come up and provide that consultation and subject matter expertise. In addition, Mike has, he's really gotten out there. His motto is outreach, engagement, and empowerment, and he's done just that through trainings and exercises. He's provided 55 training sessions and reached over 780 attendees. In addition, we're working very closely with occupational health and safety to build out a new training curriculum that can be, based on whatever the needs are of our particular population, our city workforce. We are also building out a city network of security professionals. We know a staff of 3, as of July 1, 2022, is not enough to cover all of the security needs of our city. So again, through empowerment, engagement, and information sharing, we are building out, developing the safety and security liaison model. So we have liaisons in different facilities and different departments, and we're sharing information with them. We're also looking at our information technology capabilities. We just had a meeting yesterday with IT, as well as police and ECCS to talk through what platforms we need to provide that integrated response. And we know we have a lot of work to do on the security policies. We're reviewing those, and we're going to come up with a schedule for how to tackle those. So that's a lot, I know, but it just speaks volumes to the work that Mike has done and our partnership with our public safety and all city organizations. So on the emergency management side, we have done a lot as well, and I'm very excited to talk about all of that. We have had to maintain a mission-ready environment. That's our goal. So at all times, we are planning for hurricane season while we're looking at civil unrest, while we're planning for cyber attacks and all of that. It's a crazy field that we're in, but we do try to maintain that readiness. And in fact, another fun fact for you, we have averaged about 5 EUC activations every year since 2017. That shows a lot, right? That we're a busy city and that we stay ready to respond to our needs as they come up. We do manage a lot of grants. We apply for them to leverage our services. So we have a total of 11 grants that we're actively managing as we speak. A lot of that, 8 of those grants are actually local grants. Flood mitigation, recovery, resiliency, and also response. And then 3 are regional grants. So we, Virginia Beach Emergency Management, we're one of the largest in the region, and a lot of the localities look to us to leverage our capacity to help the region and instill that capacity building. We are also working on a FEMA regional catastrophic planning grant. That's one of those grants that I was talking about. It's about $1 million, and it's to assess post-disaster housing in our gaps. So we're actively working with a contractor as we speak in the 17 localities under the PDC to implement that as the fiscal agent. Through another grant, we did complete a hazard identification and risk assessment report that is for the South Side localities. It helps us verify what we're planning for so that we always have a risk-measured approach. In addition, since July 1, we have had about 7 citywide exercises that we plan across 5 or more departments. So that has included our first ever Hurricane Preparedness Day for our Emergency Operations Center staff. It also included a 4-day training in which FEMA came down. We coordinated with Chesapeake and Norfolk, and we had senior leadership meet to talk about what their role is, the policy level role is in managing disasters, the response and the recovery side. And we do have a 2-day workshop coming up where the National Transportation Safety Board is coming down to provide guidance on setting up a family assistance center after active threat situations. In addition, we do a lot of special event planning. We have about 9 Department of Homeland Security rated events that's based on a threat matrix that are in our city every year. In addition, we have a lot more that we provide unified public safety planning for to ensure that we are linked up and we have a document at the end of the day that we can turn to and say, this is our response if something were to happen. We are also working with our public safety partners to build out an active threat program. We got a grant to help us with some of this, and we're looking at our policies, we're looking at exercises, tactical and at the command level, and we want to pair that with a crisis communications plan. So we hired a contractor who is developing a centralized crisis communications plan for the city, working with OEM, ECCS, and the communications office. And in addition to that, we are developing a family assistance center plan. We're taking what we've learned over the last couple years, revising that, and that's why we have the NTSB coming down. We want to reaffirm what we're developing aligns with our national best practices. We have a lot beyond that, but I'll stop there, and I will say, where we are now is we are coming out of 2 years of a pandemic environment. We've managed the ebbs and flows, and we're trying to still look ahead toward the future. Bringing security on under emergency management means that we can better align and leverage resources on either side to initiate our citywide planning efforts. It's been really great, and we're finding a lot of efficiencies that we can do with Mike on board. We're also working with Tiffany in the communications office to develop a brand for emergency management, to get back out there through community outreach, through business engagement, figuring out how to bring our businesses into our emergency operations center. And we are also, most importantly, focusing on our relationships. That's what emergency management is about and what we need to continue to build with all different sectors and all different parts of our community. And I'll leave you with this. I'll say that, I often thought of emergency management as the men and women behind the curtain, but I have changed my philosophy, recently, and I'll say that we don't want to be behind the curtain. We want our public safety partners, our community, our city stakeholders to know what we do. We want them to know the value that we provide and how we can help them. So that is our goal through community outreach and through branding, better branding emergency management.
Okay, Barbara?
Well, you've got a very energetic leader, I can tell that, and that's what we need. It's not been very long that we had one person in the emergency management office, and to think that it's grown to 10, that's fine. But it used to also be hurricanes. That's exactly all that we thought about. We had to be prepared for. But my goodness, the past couple of years has taught us that we have to be prepared for anything that comes. And it's such a broad spectrum. I mean, I'm thinking about New York and what they had to respond to just this morning. Whatever comes, and I suppose that's your bailiwick now.
Exactly.
And that's really hard to imagine, but you're obviously on top of it and doing a great job. But I'm trying to get it, where does emergency management, is it public safety? Is that where it's pretty much, or are you just so much across the spectrum that you're everybody?
I think COVID changed that for us. We often relate with public safety, but we are an enterprise-wide organization. We serve the city. And so even over the last year, we're working a lot with IT and HR to build that citywide initiative because we go across the board. We need to make sure all departments are ready to respond.
Well, I guess that's the kind of thing, like now you have to teach people how to respond if there's an active shooter.
Exactly.
I mean, things that we never even thought about before. It's really amazing that within the last 2 or 3 years, this has become such an issue. Is CERT in your bailiwick, or is that in?
CERT is under emergency management, and we've done a great job of actually putting together an MOU with our CERT Foundation. So we had it on pause while we were working with legal to get that MOU in place, and we are actually in the middle of a CERT Academy for the spring. We have an excited group that we're teaching, and April 23rd is our last day. So, yep, we are reinitiating those efforts as well.
I know we miss Cookie, but you've got good people in the place. But that's the thing, it's not just dealing with the city staff, but you're dealing with everybody in the city to help everybody know what you need to do in every kind of emergency. And it's really a kind of mind-boggling to think that we have come to such a point in such a short time, but you're obviously doing a great job, and I appreciate the presentation and your work. Thank
you. Of course. Thank you. Thanks.
Hey, anybody else? Yeah, let me just say thank you. I think, once again, the prominence of your department has grown exponentially over the years, for a lot of reasons. And it's amazing the amount of coordination that you have to do among the different entities. It's like Barbara just said, that, it used to be hurricanes. It's gone way beyond that these days. And it goes way beyond our city's boundaries, too. So, but once again, it's, there's a lot of events you hope never happens, but God forbid if we're not ready. And for that, I say thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mayor, members of council, at this time, our Director of Information Technology, Peter Wallace, will come and give you an update on the proposed budget for IT.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor.
Get my beeper back.
It's not in the budget, Mayor. I'm sorry about that. But thank you anyhow for being here. For the last 2 years, I have explained nothing else besides the fact that we need technology. We have seen the world just get disrupted by the pandemic, by technology itself, and by the business value it brings. So having said that, we really recognize and appreciate the investment that's been made by council and leadership through the years. So we have 195 strong, and that includes 6 additional staff that we just transfer into IT. The reason for that is we have incorporated what we call a federated model. IT is more intrusive into the business side of the house. You can't touch anything these days without having some kind of IT balance. So what we have done is kind of bring IT closer to the front side so that we can work side by side with our business units, such as to address permits, transparency with data, things like that we're currently doing to make things more transparency added and value added as well. So that's what we have done in this budget. And that's a breakdown of where the money goes. It's kind of a boring eye chart, but nevertheless, that's kind of where we have some capitals that such as the business center, where we still do mail, believe it or not. We still have, you're talking about your beeper, we still have in charge of having delivered mail. People still use that to communicate with the city. So all those kind of combine on the IT leadership as well. As for the breakdown of what we have, of the $23 million plus, about 84% of that goes to salary. We are our own expertise when it comes to what we do, because we support the applications and the infrastructure as well. So that our greatest ability that we have is our skill set and to always be updated to what we bring to the table. Now, as far as I just mentioned about the department budget, but you can see where also the computer replacement program, securing the city is our #1 goal when it comes to our end device. So your PC, your laptop, your iPad, whatever you connect to the city, we want to make sure it's secure. And so we replace about 1,100 PCs per year to make sure that we have the latest and greatest technology and updates plugged in, so that when there's ransomware hits, we are ready for them. So that's what this chart kind of shows you, the difference that we have done in the last few years. Now, what we have done also is that we are becoming the smart city in the region. We have won numerous awards for our accomplishment, and we continue to lead the region, frankly, the Commonwealth, in what we do. We have been recognized nationally by our peers, by the experts, about how we approach technology. It's all about being ready for what's next, and that kind of resilience that we have also help us to build redundant path. In case everything ever happened to the city, we can quickly go anywhere that we want because we have adopted a cloud-first strategy. And that has allowed us to be very nimble and agile, whether it be in the city or outside the city, to be responsive, along with restoring business back to the basic of business continuity and disaster recovery. Now, one thing that we have in our way, as I mentioned before, security is really what we do. It's our core function. You can see where we are attacked around 6,500 times a day. You don't see that because it's all blocked behind the scenes. But that's how many bad actors are trying to get in. And that number has increased with the latest Ukraine-Russian war. Yeah, I can't even tell you numbers on that one. That numbers is pre that. Now, you can see last year we actually had 8 million attempts in 2020, rather. In 2021, we had 2.4 million. That's a decrease, so you can say things are looking good. But there's a reason for that. The last 2 years, we have come to council and asked you for additional money for cyber program. These are the results of that. We're now actually stopping the bad guys before they come to our front door. So the attacks has not stopped, but we have actually gone out front and configure our system to make sure that we're more agile, that we're not complacent in what we do, and so that's why those attacks are down. We work very hard to keep those numbers down. So I just want to make sure that it's not because people are leaving us alone. They're not. It's because we are actually stopping them at the front door. The other thing about this is all that we do is being data driven. City manager has brought a philosophy here about making decisions with data, and so we embrace that. And with data come more security access, and actually people want to have those data, right? So we have to protect it as well. So all of that we do is to make sure that we have a cost-optimized operation, that what we present to you is going to be running the business efficiently and be more citizen-centric. So that's why I wanted to come and point out today. But I don't want to be complacent. And this pandemic, the old adage say that don't let the crisis go to waste. I think the city has transformed itself. We have worked hybrid when we have to, and in some cases we still do, but it has shown that we are ready to be more digital transformation than what we had before. The regional ring that we saw last week, the groundbreaking event, testament to that. We are actually the leading gateway to the world right here on the beach. We have more fiber coming in faster than anywhere else in this country. Okay, so we should be proud of that. And we know that because of that, we're going to be looked at to continue to lead the way. So that's where we are, and technology that you invest in supports that. Thank you.
Rosemary, can you kindly comment on what he just said about your initiative with Peter on the fiber ring?
Well, Peter is also the alternate for voting on the Southeast Network Authority. So in fact, on Friday we had a meeting and I took a medication and I got sick to my stomach and couldn't make it. So it's like the last minute, Peter, can you make it for me? And so he was there and filled in and admirably as well. So we did the groundbreaking, and our mayor was there, and we had people from across the region and from Mark Warner's office, and we broke ground on the 119-mile fiber ring that's going to take about 18 months to build.
Right.
And that's where, of course, the cables are going to be coming in from
Spain,
different
Africa.
continents, Africa, South America,
Right.
and Europe. And it's going to be super fast, absolutely super fast. And it's also going to save us money.
Absolutely.
With our own internet, so that we're not going to have to be paying some of these.
Yeah, the
high-
goal is to get what we call wholesale pricing for internet.
Mhm.
So you're going to have faster and cheaper price for that once we connect.
And ARPA funds paid for our portion of that.
Yes.
So that was pretty darn good too. So anyway, Peter does just an absolutely fantastic job. And so can you tell us if there's some things that are not funded that we should be looking at that are really necessary?
I was told by somebody I can't talk about that, but no, I'm just no, actually, we've done a good job for the last several years funding.
When in doubt, delegate.
No, we have done a good job funding. I think that IT have been very blessed to have the leadership that we have. There's always obviously more, but again, we concentrate on the security of our infrastructure. That is our core, and to make that more transparent to our citizens as well. So whatever we have in the budget has been going along just fine.
And these numbers of fighting the good fight is just pretty darn exciting. Our software for real estate assessments, how are we doing? Because that's that's our largest income stream.
Yes.
How are we on that? Because I know it's really old, because It's been there as long as we have.
Yeah, it's actually, we had a meeting about it this last week, and we are looking at the overall package. It is legacy. We like to have that more, again, cloud-based, if you can, so that we can be more agile. And so we have to talk to real estate assessor and the commission revenue and treasurer as well to make sure that what we do have, because they all integrate with each other, that it supports the core.
So is that funded and it just has to be implemented or built?
Yeah. Vice Mayor, in this budget, I think there is a plus up for the real estate assessor IT equipment. I think the real estate assessor asked for staff, and we didn't approve the staff for further consideration for city council, but the IT components we did approve.
So the IT is in the budget?
Yes, Council.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Now, did I understand that the groundbreaking, and, correct me if I might have misheard it, that the cables that we're getting from Europe and everything can transport the data from every motion picture ever made in 47 seconds?
That is correct.
Was,
You heard-
was that
Yep.
the accurate?
You
Every
heard
motion
correct.
picture ever made, it could transport it in 42 seconds.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, yes, it does
I
exist.
mean, that's kind of mind-blowing, if you can kind of put it in those terms.
Yeah, I grew up with 5 TV stations in New Jersey, and now we got 400 stations, and my wife says there's nothing on TV. Yeah, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Peter, for all that you do for our city, and congratulations again on your award. My question is more so centered around staff, and I know that's something this body is looking at, making sure our staff salaries are competitive. I understand when it comes to technology, though, that sector, we can never be where the private sector is. And so in your humblest opinion, what can we do to make sure we are attracting and retaining staff that you have, and would that involve furthering their education as well, opportunities for them to get more accreditation?
You picked in something very key right there, training. So the salary, we cannot compete against the private sector. However, one thing that we've always done, even during the budget session, we've never cut training, because some of those training could mean knowledge that surpass what you currently have, and people stay here because they see you invest in them, and so they give it back. So I cannot undercut when you say training. That's really the key. So yeah, the retention of that, and also having the flexibility to work hybrid has helped a lot. People have to readjust many places, and just the fact that they could do that, I say, I'm sticking around. I got $10,000 more over here, but I'm going to stay here because you allow me to work from home for most of the week. So all of that is part of the mix that we have done to retain staff.
Thank you.
Hey, anybody else? Beyond incredible, Peter. Taking us the city to the next level. Because, once again, once we start getting the cables coming in, and, with the offshore wind and everything, we're going to start bringing in those industries that are going to create the jobs that our families are going to be able to find work right here. And you're part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, Bobby Tahan is going to come and present to council on something else other than a planning item, his budget that he's proposing for council's further consideration.
Bobby, I got to ask you about this one ditch. No, I'm only kidding.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, I have the opportunity to present the Planning Department's FY 23 budget. As you know, the Planning Department is at the forefront of customer service, as well as being the gatekeeper for our regulatory compliance for development throughout the city. And so with that comes with a need to, at some points in time, to provide additional staffing in order to make sure that we can keep up with those regulatory needs. On the screen you have here is the 142 full-time employees in 5 divisions with a budget of just over $13 million. This is 9 additional FTEs above the current fiscal year. This is the breakdown of the divisions and the funding. We have some funding that comes from public utilities that support our Development Services Center for our public utility engineers. as well as we have a funding for our transportation group that also supports HRT and our transportation initiatives. In this chart, you see the changes in our budget. One of the key changes to our budget is that the funding for the Hampton Roads Transit is being shifted to the non-departmental section of the city's budget, outside of the planning department's budget. The planning department staff will continue to monitor and track, as well as provide support for the HRT initiatives. However, to more accurately reflect the operations of that money, it is being proposed to be shifted into the non-departmental section of the city manager's budget. In addition to this, we have some corrections to some business centers where some of the funding that was provided for some of the short-term rental programs were put into a cost center where zoning administration and planning administration were combined. When we separated them, we had to put the money back where that belonged. And then also in permits and inspections, you can see a plus up of 7 positions in permits and inspections, which is funded through a proposed fee increase in the permit fees, which have not been raised since 2004. So again, one of the key things is that the change in the HRT contribution being moved to the non-departmental section to more accurately reflect our budget expenditures. There is a request for certain permanent inspection fee increases, which is essentially $20 on our base fee for our permits for each different category in the permitting functions. What that will do is help us to maintain our current service level as well as provide the public with improved support. Many of those positions will deal with building inspections as well as our mechanical inspections. Due to changes in the existing building code, that is the grace period to go into the 2018 building code comes up on July 1st. We're required to do additional inspections or have staff that will review these additional inspections for energy, from the energy code, as well as for our building code, as we have updated building materials, where we used to do as a convenience for our builders, where we were able to do combined inspections. We're unable to do that with some of the building materials now, as some of the things are covered up in a way that we cannot inspect them at the same time. So with that will come additional inspections, which requires additional FTEs to offset that workload. In addition to that, we have implemented an IT federated model at the direction of the city manager, which helps to provide support to the planning department in regards to our information technology services that we have. As you know, the Acela permitting system is what is our front-facing system, as well as what logs all of our complaints and has all of our information. The City Council was gracious enough to provide through our vacancy savings during this past fiscal year an amount to allow us to move forward with doing improvements with the Acela system, which we have seen as after we've completed Sprint 1, some drastic improvements for our franchise utilities as we move forward. So that's our Verizon's, our Virginia Natural Gas. And we continue to have additional things that we need to improve so that we can help to help facilitate the building permit process for all those that utilize the system. The joint federated model has the IT staff with joint FTEs that Peter noted that he was implementing with his teams to be housed within the Department of Planning, with the majority of them to be split between planning and information technology, but with their support, with their command structure reporting through IT, right? A planner doesn't know IT well as an IT person. So to have them report to a person that has a IT background and to make sure that we follow all the proper protocols and also document it. We found that as we've implemented the system over the years, many times a lot of it was not documented in a way, and we had a third party come in to assist us, which, though they made things work, didn't actually make it easy for us to transition when we went to the cloud recently, which is causing some of the issues we have right now. Some of our key initiatives that we're working through is the continued implementation of the revised stormwater management regulations. As there's been a lot of work over the last a year almost to review the stormwater management regulations, and not only to facilitate the development process, but also to help streamline it as well. There's a number of additional outcomes that came from those meetings that we need to continue to work on implementing, and so that is going to be one of our key initiatives as we move forward. The city manager's initiatives for VB strategy and VB stat implementation have been that data-driven portion of our reviewing our information to assure that we look at how we do our processes, which has led us to why we had to do the improved IT support as we reviewed that information, as well as trying to improve our customer service reporting and the data collection that we have. Unfortunately, we have a software system that when it was set up just to pick up what we did by hand and put it in the computer rather than actually utilize it to get information easily. And so we're trying to fix that now. We are kickstarting again the comprehensive plan update. It seems like that is a continuing thing that we discuss. My hope is for us to move forward with that with public outreach as we have hopefully the pandemic behind us at this point in time, as well as short-term rental enforcement, which will always be at the forefront, as City Council did approve the additional fee for staff in order for us to be able to have staffing to enforce the short-term rental regulations. So again, in conclusion, for the Department of Planning, we'll continue to analyze our existing processes and regulations, as we've heard very clearly from City Council, to engage the Planning Commission, as well as the Process Improvement Steering Committee, to come up with ways to streamline the development review process, as well as meet the goals of City Council to continue to provide safe and resilient development that will last not just for a few years, but for a lifetime. Again, as I noted previously, we'll continue to work on the requested improvements from the Stormwater work group, that Friday work group, to help facilitate the site plan review process, which includes a lot of engagement with our development community as well as our engineers to help provide a common understanding of information. We wanted to make sure that we check that off before we do anything else as well, so we're working diligently to try to kickstart that for this summer as we move forward. As well as you know, we're changing the model from a reactive to a proactive enforcement response to short-term rentals. Our civil inspections, which are our complaints about drainage, as well as zoning inspections of discretionary approvals or applications. I've heard loud and clear questions brought up about who is going to come up and inspect these conditions for a conditional use permit or the proffers for a specific development. That is with zoning, and we are setting up a program to do that more proactively as we continue to move forward. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Any questions, Barbara?
How many vacancies do you have across the whole department?
I just looked that up. Currently, right now, we have, I believe it's 10 vacancies. So 2 weeks ago, I had a luncheon with all the new employees in our department, so that we've hired over the last 6 months, and that room was filled with 20 people. So we've had an opportunity to fill some of our positions and get some faces in that are eager and willing to work. And so we have a great new team, and we're going to continue to try to fill these positions. I will say the positions that are left open are the ones that are hard to fill. So some of our senior level engineers, as well as some of our senior level positions in our mid-level managers that deal with zoning enforcement, are some of the ones that are difficult to fill at this moment.
Well, that's an improvement. Does the short-term rental fee pretty much cover the cost of enforcement, or have you had enough experience yet to know if that does that?
We projected it to, however, we have not had enough time to baseline the information. Currently, right now, everyone is coming in to get their permits, and hopefully by next fiscal year, we'll have a better number of understanding the number of permits and the fee, and to make sure that it's offsetting the enforcement costs.
When you say you're going to be more proactive instead of reactive, so that you are able to keep up with what's out there rather than just operating on complaints.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else? You know, Bobby, you know, you're doing tough work in challenging times. And let me just highlight when Scott Miller, the president of Virginia Wesleyan, came the other day, first thing he did was give a shout out to a department that there was a far more user-friendly, proactive, attitude that, he really appreciated. And I think that's reflective of your leadership and, what's going on. You have a tremendous responsibility. And, sometimes you do stuff that you can't win no matter what. But, something, you're like the Duracell bunny. You keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Appreciate it.
Mayor, at this time, we're going to have our Public Utilities and Director come and present on the Public Utilities budget, and also followed by that will be the Water and Sewer CIP portion of the budget.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Good, good. Mayor Dyer, members of council, it's a pleasure to see you today. Give you a overview of the Public Utilities FY23 proposed budget and a quick summary of our capital program as well. Wanted to take a minute to introduce some staff members that are accompanying me today that were instrumental in putting our plans together, including Meredith Kellum, who is our business manager, Don Piron, who's our planning and analysis bureau lead, and Joe Yunkin, who is a new employee for us, serving as the Public Utilities Finance Officer. We're glad to have Joe on board. We got him from the city of Norfolk. We've lost members to Norfolk, so it's nice to get them back.
Yes, we definitely have.
So I wanted to start off with an organizational summary. Public Utilities has 415 FTEs spread across 5 divisions, and we have a proposed budget this year of $136.5 million, which represents a 1.5% increase over current year. Our FY23 budget provides for the continuation of all current services with no rate increases and no additional FTEs being requested. You'll see that our contracts for water treatment and water sales with the city of Norfolk account for our largest single expense in our budget. Those are followed closely by personnel and operating expenses, and those 3 components are always relatively the same percentage-wise each year. We call them the big 3, and it's what we concentrate on funding each year. I'm sorry. This is our revenue forecast for FY23, and as a self-sustained enterprise fund, you'll note that it's about 93% of our revenues come from what we bill each month for water and sewer charges. So it's a relatively simple operation as long as we keep the bills out and keep the money rolling in. And this next slide actually shows you the line items that we'll be funding in FY23. We've got a lot of pluses and minuses along this list that have largely served to cancel one another out. But our biggest change this year is a $2.2 million increase associated with our contracts with Norfolk, and that's due to the fact that we're seeing a little bit more in water sales, so we're paying a little bit more for treatment cost. There's also an escalator in our contracts that's built on inflation and CPI index, so we're planning for that to go up a little bit. So that's really our largest change. We also have additional money in reserves to deal with salary increases, potential changes from the market salary, and VRS cost increases. So I wanted to give you a quick summary of our capital program. As you can see, sewer funding tends to outpace water, and that's normal. If you look at the total 6-year program, it's normally about 70% of all funding going towards sewer, the remaining 30% towards our water system. But in FY23, it's a little bit different. Lake Gaston, who many of you remember going after for years and years, is becoming an aging system now. It's been in operation for over 20 years, so we've got some regular maintenance that has to be done on that system now. It's got 6 river crossings that need painting. We're actually getting rid of one of those river crossings and taking the pipeline under the Meharon River, so we're looking forward to that happening because we have routine expenses clearing log jams at that particular river crossing every time we get a significant storm. So we're spending some money on the pipeline, and we've got a couple of pretty significant water line replacement projects that are coming. One in Pembroke Meadows that comes in at $5.3 million, and Green Garden over in Green Run at $3.8 million. So at least for FY23, we're seeing about a 50-50 split in what we're putting into our capital program, and that's pretty unusual, but it just has to do with the timing of our needs this year. So next I want to go over our means of financing. Our FY23 first year of our capital program comes in at about $33.6 million. Of that, about 22.6 will be financed with revenue bonds. We continue to make a significant investment in non-borrowed funds using pay-go, and net assets will fund about 1/3 of our FY23 capital expenses. And that's something that we do to try to mitigate our dependence on bond funding and to help stabilize our rates. So our departmental highlights focus squarely on service delivery and the ongoing provision of safe and reliable drinking water and sewer collection services that far exceed all state and federal requirements. We're fortunate that with the ongoing support of our council, we've been in a position to continue to responsibly fund and invest into our water and sewer system so that we have very safe and reliable services. And part of trying to ensure that we're putting our money where the needs are, our engineering group does regular analysis of our system. And recently, some of that analysis has revealed that we need to do a little bit of changing and rescheduling in some of our projects to address the needs that are being identified where we're having the largest amount of breaks, service requests, things like that. So we're doing a little bit of shifting in terms of reprioritizing some projects and adding some projects. I'll talk about the 3 new projects that we're adding. Other highlights, or it's better termed as realities, is that utilities has not been immune to the supply chain issues, cost increases that are really hitting just about any business across the world, really. We had an item on the agenda last week where we were requesting $2.3 million to be reappropriated to help us fund some work that we've got on the Boulevard and First Colonial, where we had costs that were 90% above our engineer's estimate to get that work done. So it's a reality, but our engineering group and financial folks continue to react to ensure that we're continuing to make the best use that we can of available funding. And despite all of that, we have some really good ongoing work that's happening. We've got some pictures here of our Columbus Loop water storage and pumping station facility. This is the largest pumping station in Virginia Beach. Our largest one is now the Tom Leahy station out in Lake Gaston. But this is the largest one within the confines of Virginia Beach, and we've recently had a lot of work out there rehabbing that facility, and just a relatively small amount left to go out there. So lots of good work that's happening. Wanted to highlight some of the new projects that have been added. Said it's 3 new projects. It's actually 4 line items because Green Garden is a combined water and sewer project that's being added to FY23. And then there's a sewer project in Aragona Village and a water project in Kings Grant that are being added to the out years. And again, that's based on recent engineering analysis where we're really trying to prioritize where we're having the most problems in our system. So this chart shows the categories of our sewer and water projects, and as you can see, replacement of aging infrastructure is the primary driver of our capital program. In sewer, it looks like the Pac-Man there with aging infrastructure is the green. On the water side, it's not quite as dominant as sewer, but a lot of what you see that's categorized as roadway and stormwater coordination could just as easily be categorized as aging infrastructure. So that's the challenge of not only Virginia Beach utilities, but all of my counterparts across the region, the state, and the country is once the pipe goes in the ground, that's its best day, and unlike wine, it doesn't get better afterwards. So major changes and initiatives. The EPA has adopted a revision to the lead and copper rule. This is an EPA rule that's really geared towards keeping customers across the country safe from lead contamination. I think everybody remembers the situation that happened in Flint, Michigan years ago. I think that we're very fortunate where we feel like we've got the safeguards in place to prevent anything like that from happening. But really the lead and copper rule is more about lead that you have in your distribution system. Lead gets into drinking water by leaching from lead components in the distribution system into the water supply. And in Virginia Beach, we're fortunate that we're a relatively young city, so we have very little lead in our distribution system. And the lead that was in our distribution system was put in many years ago. It tended to be a connection device to the main called a lead gooseneck. And those goosenecks tended to tie into galvanized service lines. And we're fortunate where our soils are just corrosive enough in Virginia Beach where we think that the vast majority of any galvanized lines that were installed in Virginia Beach have already failed. So we think that our lead problem is very small, but we're not immune to meeting the federal mandates that come from this rule change. So we're working with our state and federal regulators now to understand what exactly we're going to have to do to meet the new rules. The biggest component of it is an inventory where you got to know what's in your system. We have 135,000 connection points. So we're working to try to mitigate how many that we actually have to go out and physically identify through either some sampling or identifying that certain areas are newer than a certain age, where we make some assumptions that we don't have lead in those areas. But all of those details are unknown at this time, so the costs are unknown, but we are paying close attention, and that work and the planning for this has already started. So a few other initiatives that I wanted to share with you. The first one is one that we're really proud of, and that's the assistance that we've been able to provide to our customers and helping them to get through the worst impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. First of all, throughout the state of emergency during the pandemic, and even before in Virginia Beach, we took the initiative to stop any disconnections for delinquency to water service. And so we had stopped that all the way through the end of the state of emergency, which expired at the end of August of 2021. So we're now back to cutting off service, but we went for a long time in not performing any sort of service termination for delinquency. And in addition, we worked hard to try to get some of the local and federal money out to our customers to assist them with their water bills. And Virginia Beach was really a leader, and we were very fortunate to have had the opportunity to work with our Human Services Department and with IT to develop some pretty sleek automated programs to enable more money to get to customers more quickly. And in total, we distributed about $8 million in funding to our customers during the pandemic. So we're proud of that accomplishment. We are also complying with a state mandate, which says that the city needs to offer a payment extension plan of up to 24 months, which is a long period to service customers who need help, but we are doing that now. And so we've had a number of initiatives that have really been designed to soften the blow of the impacts of the pandemic. Other things, we've got continued efforts to deal with or improve our employee recruitment and retention. I've heard some of the other directors talk about that today. We're hopeful that some of the changes that may be coming from the market salary survey may help us there. We've worked with our Human Resources Department to try to develop, for an example, we along with Public Works, have a stipend for our employees with CDLs. It's a hot commodity where our folks get CDLs, and then they've got the private sector offering them a lot more money to go work for them. So we're trying, if we can't fully compete, trying to at least improve our attractiveness through a stipend that we implemented this past year. And it seems to be working in terms of helping us keep people. Nonetheless, we have a vacancy rate of just over 20%. So for us, that's about 80 positions that we're still trying to fill. And lastly, I'd just like to emphasize our FY23 budget has no rate increases, and we plan to continue all current services and continue delivering quality water and sewer collection services to our customers. So with that, I'll stop and answer any questions.
Tremendous job, Bob. Any questions? Okay, Michael, Guy, and Barbara.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question if, well, you're on the right slide now, slide 12. I get a lot of feedback about the utility bill. No one likes to pay the utility bill, of course. However, it's obviously necessary to maintain the wonderful services that you referenced and that you and your team do a great job of delivering, and I appreciate that. Could you just talk a little bit about what that process looks like for those people who have applied for relief, and how sort of what the thresholds are? Because one of the things that I hear about is that the bill seems high, but then they make too much money to qualify for relief. So I'm wondering if you could describe a little bit about the threshold, and then I may have a follow-up question.
Well, Councilman Berlucci, there's been a number of programs that have been out there, and the thresholds have changed. The first federal program that we had requirements where customers had to produce documentation that simply demonstrated that they had been impacted in some way, shape, or form. It was pretty flexible, but if people were able to demonstrate that they had lost a job within the household, that sort of thing, they were able to qualify for assistance. The most recent round of funding that we had, we were able to appropriate that funding on behalf of the customers who were delinquent. So there wasn't this requirement for self-certification. So it doesn't get much more flexible than that. There are other programs of a much lesser degree of funding. We have a city program called the Water Assistance Program.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So the Water Assistance Program is administered on our behalf by Human Services, and it follows the same guidelines as other public assistance. So it is income-based, and it also has some other stipulations. In order to qualify for funding from that program, the customer is required to meet the full amount of the outstanding balance in order to qualify for that funding. So there's another program called the Help to Others program, or H2O. That's a regional program that Virginia Beach participates in. That tends to have a little bit more flexibility than the Water Assistance Program, again, which is income-based. So when funding is available in those programs, sometimes we're able to, in fact, I just worked with a customer to provide assistance where between those two programs, it was really able to cover that particular customer's needs. So the Water Assistance Program can create some challenges for customers because of some of the restrictions that are in place. But that program is really geared towards helping folks who truly cannot afford to pay their bill. So that's why it's aligned with other federal aid programs.
I appreciate that. I have two quick follow-up questions. One is, if someone were interested in exploring access to the programs, where would they go?
Well, they are able to either call Public Utilities Customer Service. All of our agents are familiar with those, or the Water Assistance Program the Human Services Department can assist customers with that. For H2O, it's the Norfolk Salvation Army that actually administers that program.
Thank you. And is there a degree of flexibility that you and your team have in terms of, because the goal is you don't want to nobody wants to disconnect the service to a family, particularly to a family who are underserved. Is there I'm sure there must be a variety of opportunities for extensions for, you work with the customers. Could you describe a little bit about what that would look like if someone's in a crisis situation or an emergency situation, or what's the process for disconnection? It's got to be a pretty lengthy process of not paying.
Well, it's become much more lengthy due to some relatively recent state legislation from just a few years back. And prior to that legislation, we would work with customers through payment extensions primarily is what we would do. And we even had it programmed online where customers could just go on, press a button, and get an extension. For other customers, an extension may not work if they are really behind, or let's say they left a large bill at one property, moved somewhere else, then reestablish service in Virginia Beach, and that delinquent balance follows them. That can be more of a challenge. But the state legislation that happened a few years back required that utilities can't cut a customer off for a delinquent balance until it's aged 90 days. So for the vast majority of our customers who just needed a little bit of time, maybe they're waiting on a check to come in or that sort of thing, that change solved a lot of problems because again, it's 90 days from the time that service is billed before they are subject to being cut off for that amount. So I think that's been really helpful. It certainly delays collections on the one hand, but from a customer perspective, I think that's been very helpful. Above that, we try to work with customers because we have such a delay in collections now. It does get to a point where we're trying to balance trying to help customers keep their service on while also administering our responsibilities of collecting, because if we don't collect, then those costs end up getting spread out across the rest of the customer base. So it is a challenge. I personally have been working on that challenge for about 30 years, and it doesn't seem like it gets any easier. You never take any joy in terminating anyone's service, so we do the best that we can.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Barbara?
I think you fairly well answered my question when I was thinking about your vacancies and so forth, because you do have a department of people who are on call, I guess, 24 hours and so forth. Is that where the bulk of the vacancies are in being able to hire the people who have to fill those spots?
Well, that's been one of our challenging areas is in our operations division where the true 24/7 work is occurring. And we've done a number of things to try to offset the impacts of the higher vacancy rate, where we have really shifted away from fully staffing weekend crews and after hours to ensure that we're and also deferring some routine scheduled maintenance work to really focus on service requests from customers where there's a need, where there's a sewer stoppage or a water leak, where we're prioritizing getting that work done first and then prioritizing getting that work during the day. We're covering more of our after hours and weekends through the use of standby. But we're looking forward to getting to the point where we have better staffing, because my biggest concern is having a major storm event and trying to recover from that with the current staffing situation. That's my biggest concern.
Well, that's one of those situations that we don't want to be in, but I'm assuming that maybe the market salary survey is going to help us fill those positions and keep retention.
I hope so. It's a two-part problem, recruiting and then retention. Our call center has been a great example where once upon a time, we had a standard of we had to have 6 people at all times in our call center when we're scheduling lunch breaks and things like that. We went through a period where we had 3 people total working in the call center because of all the vacancies. And it takes a long time to get people trained and up to speed. So we really want to focus on recruiting and then retaining those folks that we get in and train so that we can deliver the level of service that we're accustomed to providing.
Well, this is one of those areas where you've got to have the staff when we need them, and we don't want to be sitting around without folks to go right there and fix the water in the sewer when it breaks.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Rosemary.
So how do your, and thank you so much for what you do. How do your folks, you think having a step system, step plan would help for your employees?
I think that, you know, in the city, we went through the Great Recession, and so we had years where the city was really focusing on trying to save jobs. Right. And that wasn't unique to Virginia Beach. That was a challenge across the country. So I think that not just Virginia Beach, but really cities all across the country struggled falling behind a bit in terms of what we were paying. I think when we started recovering, the private sector tended to recover a little bit faster than we did. And so that's really what we've seen is that there's been a need for a correction. It's really difficult to hire people in the $20,000 range and expect to keep them over the long term. The private sector has really been making adjustments. You see signs all over the place about what McDonald's is paying, what Dollar Tree is paying, you know, all these private sector folks. And we find ourselves competing with them when we're trying to hire an entry-level maintenance worker to work out in the rain and the snow and the cold and the heat versus maybe having the opportunity to scan items at a retail store. You know, that's where we are struggling. So I think we're in need of a correction. And like I said, working with HR, I think we've been able to do some things that are already providing some help, but I think we've got a little bit of distance to go.
But that doesn't answer my question about
the step plan. I haven't seen details of a step plan to be able to really share those details. Obviously, I think that any time that there are planned regular increases, that employees have something to look to make a decision about whether to leave or not. If there's no information coming about, okay, well, is there going to be a merit increase this year or not? Then I think that adds to the challenge and certainly adds to the pros and cons that any employee is going to take a look at when they have another opportunity.
But we're being told by other sectors that it will help with recruiting and retaining if we have a step plan for their divisions.
Well, it makes sense to me. Again, I think if employees know that they are going to have an opportunity to earn more money, it certainly got it.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
But this is an enterprise fund, so is that going to be a detriment, or, I mean, particularly with no rate increases?
Well, we routinely, in fact, we're getting ready to initiate a cost of services study. We've not had rate increases for a number of years. The last one that we had was when Mr. Jones was able to help us to negotiate the new deal with the city of Norfolk, and we had a water rate increase, that's about 3 years ago, if I remember correctly, to offset some of those expenses. But it's been a long time since we've had one. We haven't completed. We're just initiating this study, but I anticipate that we'll have information to fold in, and so we can see what we need in terms of revenues to ensure that we continue to be a sustainable enterprise. But you're right. I mean, if our personnel costs are one of our big three, so it's definitely a rate driver.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Bob, thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
Can't run a city without you.
All right, I appreciate it. It's good seeing you all.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, LJ Hansen, our Director of Public Works, will come and present about Public Works proposed budget. Before you get started, just want to let council know that the pending planning items is not needed to be presented because there's no items to present because we haven't had the planning commission meeting. So there's some found time after LJ completes his presentation. There comes with discussion.
LJ, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, members of council. What a long day. A lot of departments talking about their needs and what we're doing, and I respect you all for being able to sit through here and listen to everybody's needs. It is my pleasure this afternoon to talk to you a little bit about the Department of Public Works and what we're doing, and I thought this first slide is appropriate to talk about our mission statement. One of the key statements in our mission statement is talking about the life cycle of the elements that we provide. Earlier today, you heard from several members of our staff that talked about buildings. I think Tom Nicholas described a number of building projects that were underway. You heard from Dave Jarman talking about a $1.3 billion CIP program on roadway. Certainly from the stormwater standpoint, we're well over $500 million. And that's all capital improvement. What I'm here to talk to you about this afternoon is our operating budget, and our operating budget is every bit as important, if not more important, than our CIP in many regards. The only way that capital improvement project, those capital improvement projects gets done is by the men and women of Public Works, and they're funded out of our operating budget. And I think that that's really important. So the next slide we have here is a bit of our organizational chart. But there's a lot of elements under the Department of Public Works, and a lot of elements that have nothing whatsoever to do with CIP or building anything that's new. Our roadway maintenance folks, our refuse folks, our fleet folks, operations support. There are a lot of men and women that do a lot of work in the city and in the Department of Public Works. So our organizational summary is shown here. We have 976 employees with 20 different divisions. Our total fiscal year 23 budget is a little over $211 million. There's a couple items shown on the bottom here that are non-departmental funds, and that means that they're not tracked in that $211 million. So we have a citywide vehicle replacement, which last year was about $4.3 million. This year we were given a plus up of 1.6 to make it to a total of $6 million. And then we have about $3 million in leases, and that would be building leases, that type of thing that we also have. But again, that's not tracked in our budget. Of the $211.9 million that we identified, it's broken out as follows. And about the city garage and the fuel make up about 11%. The general fund obviously is a large component at 44%. But of that general fund, I thought it was interesting to note that 46.6 million of that general fund come from the urban maintenance program, VDOT. And that makes up about 50% of the general fund contribution. Of course, the stormwater fund is a big component for what we're doing on the stormwater side of things. And waste management fund makes up about 20%. And so now we have a little bit more detail of where that looks. And what I'd like to point out is this is a flat budget. Despite the addition of the stormwater referendum, despite the other elements that we're taking on as it relates, and I'll touch on some of the other new things that we're intending to do, this is a very flat budget with a growth of only 0.05%. And I think it's really important that the taxpayers know that. This has not been a tremendous year of growth for the Department of Public Works, despite the fact that we do have a number of new initiatives that are underway. In fact, our stormwater fund shows a loss of about $3.1 million. And it's not that we're losing money, it's not that we're going to be collecting less money. Last year we had to take some money in from fund balance, and that money is not being contributed this year. With regard to major funding changes and initiatives, we submitted 22 proposals for fiscal year 23. One of those advanced and was recommended. That was the additional $1.6 million for the fleet replacement. 4, we're finding ways to fund internally by rearranging our priorities, but the remainders did not. The internally funded proposals that we managed to fund internally were some software implementation that's going to be very important to us for implementing our stormwater program, the Masterworks software. implementation. That's going to help us on our CIP side of the house to be able to track projects, to be able to give citizens and you all really good answers as to how much money we're spending, when the projects will be delivered, where they are in the process. It's a really good program, it's a software program, and it's something that we are well past needing. It is going to take us a little bit of time to get it implemented, but we did find the funding internally to make that go to the next stage. We have some additional money for cleaning of city buildings and some additional money for city building utilities and funding an energy cap update that's required. Again, that's money that we reallocated from our existing budget. That's not new revenue. Major staff changes and initiatives. Initial staffing is needed for the flood protection program, the federated IT model, and also our waste management department. We have added no FTEs in fiscal year 23, so in order to take care of these needs, we're trying to find employees that are located on our existing budget. And that is putting a strain on us. I'm not going to exaggerate. We are focusing on reclassifying our current vacancies to be able to accomplish that. The Holland Road Annex, actually, that's at the solid waste site. We have 3 mechanics that work out there at night. We were at 2 mechanics, and we actually brought one back in. So you can imagine how much work it takes to keep all of those refuse trucks going, and then only have 2 guys working on them all night long, getting them ready to go out the next morning. We were finding that was causing us a lot of problems, so we needed another person. Trends and issues. Inflation, supply line disruptions. You heard it a number of times today. I'm sure you'll hear it through the remainder of your presentations. I'm not going to lament on it any further. Staffing shortages, retention and hiring issues. Again, we've added no FTEs despite the new programs and the new things that we're trying to accomplish. One other item that I should have mentioned is that the Department of Public Works is also adjusting some of what we're doing on our purchasing side of the house. So trying to assist the purchasing department and assist us as we roll into the flood protection program to be able to accelerate programs, to accelerate projects, and to be able to get those on the street faster than what we've been doing, which is not a knock on purchasing. It's just a means that we can help them try and get this increased amount of work to the street. There were a couple of items that I did want to mention under trends and issues, and these are not funded. We're going to continue to try and work on seeing if there's a way that we can fund them through our budget. But the first one is street maintenance, concrete operations. Earlier, Tom Nicholas identified to you that the city had an ADA audit. As part of the ADA audit, they asked us to go back and look at all of our ADA ramps on the street. So for every corner in the city has an ADA ramp, or probably has 4 if it's a developed street. We've been asked to go back and make sure that they're all up to code, make sure that all of our sidewalk is up to code, and to fix all of those. We're feeling that it's probably going to be a strain on what it is that we're trying to get done, so it's going to task us to be able to accomplish that goal. But nevertheless, we're working to see what we can do to get done. And the second item I really kind of wanted to mention is LED street light maintenance. For a number of years, the city adopted LED street lights because it was a smart thing to do, and Dominion did not offer LED options. So typically how a road gets built prior to this, a developer or the city would do a design project. As part of that project, we would contract with Dominion. Dominion would come in and install their street light of design choice, which they didn't have any LED options, and then they charge us basically a lease rate. So there's a certain dollar amount that we would pay for every street light in the city. Every month we pay a light bill. But when we decided that we wanted to start moving to LED lights, which were more fuel efficient or more energy efficient, they provide a better quality of light, and we felt an enhancement to what it was that we were doing in the city. Dominion didn't offer that, so instead we would add a power meter to our project, install our own lights, and then we're subsequently required to maintain them. That number, the number of those lights has increased over the last several years. We're getting to a place now where we really need to start maintaining those a little bit more, keeping an eye on them, making sure that they're not failing, making sure that the poles are doing well, that they're not subject to stresses or strains from the weather. And so that's an area that we're looking at. Additionally, I know that there have been some questions and comments about our decorative lighting on some of our bridges, and so that is also an area that we're trying to keep an eye on. This slide was added at the request of budget to talk about program cycle goals. We have tracked this for a while. It's really my desire that in the next budget presentation that I do next year, that I not do this slide necessarily, but probably try and do something that illustrates what our metrics are in a better, more comprehensive format. This is really geared a lot towards our operations side of the house, and really especially towards the stormwater side of operations. But there are many more divisions in our budget that I think would be better suited to present. But we are starting to make a little bit of headway in some areas and fall behind in others. And the areas where we are making headway specifically have been bolstered through the ARPA funding, which Mark Jones talked about earlier. As far as, I shouldn't say we're falling behind, but really that the addition of the ARPA funding is allowing us to jump ahead, whereas we're not receiving any additional funds. The $3.1 million that I mentioned we didn't take from fund balance this year, for instance, is not really going to be able to flex over to help us advance forward. But we're making progress. And the last slide I have here is just these are the initiatives that I talked about. The flood protection program, which we're all very familiar with. The federated IT model, very much like Bobby Tahan mentioned in his presentation. We are also trying to standardize what it is that we're doing with our IT program. IT did an evaluation of the Department of Public Works and found out that we have over 100 applications that are in various states of operation, meaning that sometimes they were added because they're part of a VDOT requirement, or maybe they're added because it's something that we do with the Corps of Engineers, or something that somebody developed several years ago. But it's a big, broad depth of IT-related issues, and we don't have a dedicated IT department inside the Department of Public Works, or division inside of Public Works. So much like what planning is doing, we're partnering with IT to develop a model where they're kind of integrated with us. It'll be some Public Works employees, some IT employees, hopefully working in a consolidated manner, being smart. I mentioned the increased procurement responsibilities. One area that we'd really like to make some progress on this year is reducing backlogs on the maintenance side. Now, I showed you the slide of our cycles. That's our maintenance cycles. And that would be if I go back a slide, I'll use the canal program, for instance. Our current cycle is 95 years. That doesn't mean we're 95 years behind schedule. What that means is, given the current investment, if we were to touch every single canal, it would take us 95 years to get through it, and then to get back to the first one that we did it again. Our desired cycle is a 25-year cycle. So we're not there yet, but that doesn't mean that we have 95 years of work that we're behind schedule on. But if we're talking about backlogs, that's where we actually have the work that's in-house and we are backed up. And we do have some areas where we're really significantly behind schedule. Sinkholes is one of those areas. It's about a 9-month backlog on making permanent repairs on sinkholes. Now, crews will get out, they'll safe it up, they'll make temporary repairs, but to get a permanent repair, it's taking about 9 months. And I think that's really too long. I don't think that we should be at that distance or at that time. So that's one of the areas that we'd like to make a difference in. Flexible working arrangements. I know that you've heard from HR and from many other departments about some of the things that we can do to make the workforce more adaptable, more desirable for our employees. And flexible work arrangements is one of those, and it's something that we're working on. And we're working on that, actually making some progress in that front. And then employee incentives, and a number of those were discussed earlier when HR was here. And with that, I'll gladly take any questions you all may have.
Any questions at all? You do some very important stuff. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, yes, Barbara.
I would just like to thank you and all of the staff for doing this. I kind of asked that we do it, and I really appreciate all of you being willing to have us here from all of the budget sectors, because I know we can read it, but this just makes it so much more understandable and to put the faces with what's written and to be able to hear the reasoning and the comments and ask the questions, to me, reading it just doesn't do it. This just makes it so much better, and I really appreciate the staff, and I appreciate all of you. It's been a long afternoon, and we've still got a couple more of these to go, but I just feel like it's so much more valuable this way, and appreciate that. And then I have a question. Do we have, or are we able to get an update along the way of the responses that we're getting from the website that we have, inviting people to tell us how they would balance the budget? I guess that's a question for outreach or Kathy.
The shell answer man is here.
Yes, ma'am. Councilwoman Henley, yes. So we have that. Typically, part of the process has been about a week before City Council's reconciliation. We compile that information, and we then provide it to City Council on a Friday packet with the number of responses, where people had recommendations, and what that would look like. And then so City Council can take that going into the reconciliation meeting in terms of feedback and input from the public.
Can you tell at this point whether there's a lot of activity there, or?
I haven't routinely monitored, but we can certainly do that. I can give you updates along the way if you would like, and I can get that information for you and put a timestamp on it. As of this date, we've had this amount of activity and input.
I would like that before we have the public hearing, so we kind of get a feel of whether or not we're on the right track or not the right track or whatnot. But thank you, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. We're not having the planning item, so that was a lovely way, Mrs. Henley, of segueing into council comments. Thank you. Anybody else comments or observations? You know, if I could just say, I think we got another point of pride in the city. You know, once again, we read a national headline about violence in New York City in the subways. It's a national epidemic. You know, we can't control that, but we can control what we do here in the city. And I'll tell you that we got to be very proud of our police department over this weekend that was proactive, reactive, and from what I understand from a lot of accounts, granted the crowds weren't there, but the people, the shop owners are saying that, the people that came out enjoyed themselves, and there was camaraderie, and but once again, it turned out to be, a very successful weekend that once again shows that, we as Virginia Beach welcome everybody. We want people to come all the time, and just come and respect each other, and and just enjoy Virginia Beach. So if, Patrick, if you can pass on to not only yourself, your staff, but Chief Newdigate, and the brave men and women, and the participation of the Sheriff's Department and the whole team that came together. And sometimes you hope for the best, but you got to be ready. And there was no question we were ready. Thank you. Okay, at this point, honorable members of City Council, accordance
Mayor?
with, yes.
Sorry, I need you to adjourn the.
Oh, okay.
It's still a workshop, and then.
Okay, but at this point, we're going to adjourn and get ready to go into closed session. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Yeah. Isn't it nice to have a check and balance system
Yes,
going on?
appreciate you.
Certified closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, vote is open.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need one more vote. Go ahead. By a vote of 7-0, you have certified the closed session to be in accordance with a motion to recess.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Manager, I appreciate it.
Okay, I'll email you.